So, welcome everyone. I have the honor of being joined today by Cohen Killet. Sorry, I'm messing up. Cohen Killetz. For context, anyone who doesn't know, I feel as though I followed Cohen Killetz for, I think I actually checked this. It was about almost a year in April, and I don't think I actually found you before I made my own YouTube channel, which was kind of when I started getting interested in the same type of area. But without further ado, welcome. How should I refer to you?
You can call me Killetz, Kohan Killetz. Anyone can call me boy. You can call me anything. You know, I'm not a very haughty sort of person. I'm just myself. I'm just Kohan Killetz. You know, I've had that name for a long time. I've had a YouTube channel, goodness, since I was like a teenager, talking about this stuff. 15 years, I think.
Call you anything, just don't call you late for dinner.
You can call me for dinner, but I'll invite you first.
No, I'm saying don't call you late for dinner.
Oh, and don't show up to dinner at my house having had any food for the last week.
So yeah, I guess to get started, how did you choose the name Killetz?
So Killetz, I was kind of undergoing like a discovery about myself and the Canaanite heritage that I have. And it's cringe, but back in the 2010s or even the 2000s, the internet was a different place than it is today. And I found a list of Phoenician and Canaanite names, and there was one called Hilets Baal. And I figured that would be difficult for, for the nations to pronounce, so I just used Killetz, easier. But Killetz or Helitz means restorer. So it's a restorer of Baal.
Oh, that's a really wait. So is that would be with a huff?
Yeah, with a huff. Huff.
In,
Yeah. Huff.
interesting. Yeah, I guess I never connected it because it because of the cub, but yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad okay, wait. So is I'm trying to see if I can find it here because like grammar or linguistics is my shit. So let's see. So where? Oh,
Halis. Ha. Lem.
here. Yeah, I found
Oh.
it.
Yeah. So.
Let's see. Present. Oh, also, if there's anything you want to share your screen about, just let me know. You should be able to as well. But
Okay.
here. So let's see. So chalatz, to draw off or out, withdraw, but there's probably other context that has. Yeah, to wait, machlatza is a robe of state.
It's like
Chalut.
ha. Ha. Like
Oh, yeah.
ha. Halas.
Is it connected to this idea of equipping for war?
I've always seen hadas as restoring, but it could be equipping.
Oh,
This
here,
is
wait.
the
Yeah, I think.
Phoenician, and this was years and years ago. I hadn't really gotten into the linguistic stuff back then, but that's what it meant for me.
Wait. So it was the name of someone though, like Chilitz.
Yeah, it was
Bal.
Heaventaschens. Yeah, it's the name from Ugarit. No, from excuse me, not Ugarit. From Carthage, Ugarit. That's a different one. If I had gone into this tradition more recently, I would have used a different name. Maybe something like Zimreda, Milkilu, Nakamadu, a cooler name like that.
Yeah. So yeah, how did you start to get interested in ancient canon?
Well, I was kind of reserving, my willingness to talk about this subject, but I actually had visions of these gods from a certain time in my life, and I was very secular at that point. I was an atheist, one of those asshole atheists. You can imagine when you think faces of Reddit atheism, and people are just obsessed with Dawkins and Hitchens, because that's what my dad is, with the neck beard and the fedora, and it's like faces of Reddit atheist. That's what I was when I was a teenager. But then I started getting visions, and naturally I assumed that was mental illness, and I went through all that gobbledygook, but it ended up being real. And a lot of experience transpired in my life, and I was actually able to visit Mount Zapan.
Oh wow!
With Turkey and Syria.
Wow. When was this?
This was in 2018.
Wow. That's just amazing. So, I mean, the Mount Zaphon. Wow. Like that's like, going up to Mount Olympus, but in a way it's like more connected because with Mount Olympus, I feel like a lot, I don't know, maybe I'm splitting hairs, but it feels like a lot of the traditions around Mount Olympus kind of were like less so geographically based and more so just this idea of where the heaven meets the earth, whereas like with Sappho, it was like very much like this is where the temple of Baal, the house of Baal,
and it still is actually. It's weird because I went there and it's visible. It's actually visible, but you take a photograph of it. It's like vampires. You don't see it when you take a photograph. Because I really wanted to say, "Oh, look, this is real. I'm not making it up." And I wasn't the only one who I was going with. I won't go into more detail about that, but it's actually legit.
Wow. So, yeah, I mean, like, I definitely can relate. I mean, in a different way, but to the idea of like, because at least with me, like, whenever I experience stuff like stuff that would be seen as like a bit out of the norm, it's usually much more like conceptual, not so much like what I would maybe necessarily call a vision. But I think that the idea that like, oh, if you see something, there must be something wrong with, like, why has society inculcated that into us? Because it's something that if you were to look at any traditional society and explain something similar to that, the immediate thing that people go to isn't, oh, there's something wrong with you. That's not like that's something that's only within the past 100, 200 years, really.
Mm-hmm. I think, and also like in mainstream psychology, which has changed a lot. When I was first seeing psychologists, psychiatrists, it was very much like a business thing. They were about, oh, yeah, you pay us, we give you the pills, blah, blah, blah. You know, just keep in that cycle. And I later saw a doctor who had his own faults, but at least he was concerned with honesty and helping me. And he said, you know, it's not a symptom of a psychological a psychological problem if you have religious visions. It's a valid thing. It's on the DS9. You obviously have autism, he would say. It's like, I'm obviously on the spectrum, and I'm probably a little bit bipolar as well. Like, I can get moody. But there was nothing to what I had that made him convinced that it was a hallucination or anything like that.
Yeah. And like I even think that I meant to pull this up before, but I forgot. Even just this idea of the term prophet in a Semitic context, I don't think a lot of people really realize what that means.
So the religious function of a prophet and also of a priest is actually not necessarily to tell. Well, the prophet actually is kind of like to tell people what the gods want. That's the prophet's job, or what's going to happen. The priest's job, because I'm a Kohan, I'm a priest, Hanu, it is to act as an intermediary between the people and the god. So there's an issue with the people, and the gods are complaining, and then I go to the people and say, hey, the god is mad about this, this, and this. This is what you need to do. And maybe the people are mad and need something from the gods. I say, hey, gods, the people need this, 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 and this. And that's essentially the function. Getting texts.
Yeah, so I wonder how much of that is actually like a difference in position, and how much of that is more so like a difference in function.
Yeah, well, a lot of people's frame of religion is informed by the West and Western Christianity in particular, which is a very specific, branch on the tree of the evolution of religion.
But yeah, while you're looking up wherever you are, so for anyone who didn't know, so the root naba, nun, bet, aleph, or I really do want to learn Arabic at some point, but I have not gotten not that I haven't gotten the chance, but I haven't had the time lately. But
it's a lot of work.
Yeah. One of my friends, Noam, he's taking Arabic, and it's like he's making me want to learn it more. But yeah, so naba means to utter in a low voice or sound. Interesting, especially of dogs, which dogs are typically associated with magic in the ancient world. Announced, but also exalted, elevated. Naba'a is eminence, to acquaint, inform, information, announcement, intelligence. But what gets interesting is here. Think weakened form of naba with an ayin, which means to bubble up or pour forth, a flow of words under excitement of inspiration.
Yes, that's right. And the function of the prophet in the ancient Near East was not as, we get presented in these biblical epics of Charleston Heston with the staff and the robes, and he's all dignified, and he could like shit marble, in the words of Moses. No, he was raving and the crazy, I'm in the heart of Babylon. Like in Monty Python. That's how prophets were. They were kind of lower class because they were mad, essentially at the bottom of society. They could say whatever they wanted, I guess, and it wouldn't upset the kings as much. They were seen as speaking directly from the gods.
So almost like the holy fool.
Or yes, exactly.
It's kind of funny also how it ties with, tomorrow. I mean, on multiple levels. But it's also interesting. When I realized this, it blew my mind open that the same root for Navi is the same root for Nabu, the god of what was he? What was his sphere of influence again? It was like
my impression was that he was the god of scribes and learning and writing and such, but I may be wrong.
Yeah,
That's the impression I was given.
that sounds right. And what's interesting is that, according to tradition, the mountain where, well, so according to tradition, Moses isn't buried anywhere. We don't know where he's buried, but which is, another discussion where it's like, okay, well, who was Moses and did Moses exist? But what I think is interesting is the mountain where he died was Har Nevo, or the Mount Nebo, Mount Nabu.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's really some interesting stuff there, which I feel like Moses is the one who, according to tradition, writes down the tablets of the law. He's the scribe. He's the one who basically changes it into a tradition of the book. And so it's like just the connection there to Nauvoo. It's like, I mean, there's a lot more, examples of this, like these hidden gems where it's like, wait a second, this is clearly a callback to something older. But it's the type of thing where people, if they lose the context, they just, you can't expect them to realize that it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So was there something you were going to pull up, or?
No, it's just someone was texting me and getting mad at me. I told this person that I'm streaming now, but they apparently forgot about that, and then they're getting upset that I'm not texting them.
But also, before I forget, so we got some interesting comments. So Danielle Leon said, I climbed Mount Hermon and I felt strong energy. So it's interesting. Why is it that, like, according to some traditions, Hermon is the Mount of Baal, and according to to most, is it just a difference of like the society? So it's like maybe the Phoenicians or Phoenicians and Israelites see Hermon as the mountain because it's closer to them, whereas the Syro-Phoenicians are maybe more like, oh, well, we live, kind of like the whole idea of like, oh, well, there was a temple in Jerusalem and there was a temple in Shechem.
Yeah, I think it's more like that. It's more like a regional thing. And it also may be different Baals as well. Baal is, I'm sure you're aware, is a title rather than an individual god. The Baal of Zaphon, who's simply sometimes called Baal Zaphon, is Hadad, which is a different Baal than Baal Shamin, which may be another name for El. So, and there's different Baals, and the Baal of Zaphon is really a product of the context of the kingdom of Yamhad and its connections with the Hurrian people that was developed later in Ugarit.
Interesting. So, because the Hurrian, or wait, not the Hurrians, but sorry, who are the two groups you mentioned?
Yamhad, and then Yamhad, which is the kingdom that's centered in Aleppo in the Middle Bronze Age, contemporary to Hammurabi of Babylon.
Okay, wait, I think, is this the, sorry, I'm also like juggling two thoughts at once because there's this one intro. Okay, perfect. Is this, okay, I think it's hardcore. Yeah. Okay, so this is one of the interesting things I found. So, okay, no, so this isn't the specific thing that I was referring to, but oh, boom! You even have two things here. So, let's just start off with, so here, as Yiraber Alemo, and so he will speak to them. Be'afo, it like in his nose, or like afo is also like anger. But what's interesting is becharono. Now, Haran is anger or wrath, but Horon was an underworld god who was,
he was the a deity associated with pestilence and healing and the underworld. Sort of, well, they have the same god in Greek mythology as Chiron, but Horon is just the Canaanite version.
Yeah, and so what gets interesting is, so you already have this potential like influence between the two, because I mean part of it is just because you're using the same linguistic terms, but it's either understood to be proper or non-proper, which I personally think that it's almost like a distinction without a difference, because, but I mean that's a story for another time. What I think is really interesting though is I first noticed this because of another passage, but it says, so Ve'ani nasachti, and I will pour out Malki, my kingdom, or no, wait, what? My king, or no, I have, this is saying, wait, offered up or installed. I have installed my king, Al Zion, upon Zion, Har Kodshi, my holy mountain. Now, what's interesting is to anyone who's taken a bit of Hebrew, and is also maybe like thinking a bit outside the box, they'll notice that there's only actually one different letter between Zion and Saphon.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Like, it kind of makes me think that the name Zion might have originally been referring to Saphon.
I can't say. I do think that in many cases with these sort of hard consonants, it really does kind of make a difference. You know, the p sound, p, makes a big difference, and every Semitic languages of these periods, they are consonantal languages, and there are some consonants that are soft, like yod and ain sometimes, and aleph, but it can contain significant meaning. I would say I don't think there's necessarily a connection there. It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a theory. I'm not saying that it's for sure, but okay, here I think it must be Isaiah 14:13. Is it here? Wait, no, but like just even the side. Okay, here it is. So I might be getting two things confused, but in any case, the whole idea of like Hillel ben Shachar, which, I mean, this is something that I have been trying to look a bit more into to see if if Hillel was ever understood as a proper entity, but I mean, like, it could just be referring to the idea of like the shining one. But then Ben Shachar, like, it's not Hillel HaShachar. It's not the shining of the dawn, or the shining one of the dawn. This is literally saying Hillel, who
The
is
son
the
of the god of the dawn. Yeah. There's a, you get this with every sort of religion. I think when they translate it into English, there are these things that are kind of embarrassing for them, and they kind of get swept under the rug. The classic example for me, because I spend a lot of time within the Muslim tradition, living in a Muslim country, they're trying to justify things, is if you look at, there's a part where when your wife disobeys you, chastise her gently. But the word that's actually used in the Quran is darabaha, and it means hit her. So there's they anything that comes in parentheses usually is bullshit. And I think this is another case of that where they're mistranslating in order to obfuscate a very clear meaning. That this is a polytheistic reference that I think people are just going to miss, because they're just going to learn Shahar means dawn. They're not going to learn that Shahar is the name of this deity, one of the sons of El.
Yeah, and the other thing that is, I think, even maybe a bit more clear than that is, well, for one, you have the okay, so first of all, before I forget this, I saw someone claim this was one of the stupidest things I've ever seen someone claim. And again, it's not to say that it's a stupid idea that it could mean that, but to basically, I saw someone trying to make the claim that the name of, which, people see it like, oh, Jerusalem now, but like originally it was Urushalim. But someone trying to claim that it actually was was it Hirosol, I forget, like, whatever the Greek term was, but trying to argue that was the original name. And it's like, how dumb do you have to be? Like they're basically trying to argue that, and again, they're not wrong in saying that, like, a lot of this is pre-biblical, but to say that Jerusalem isn't from Semitic, you literally have to be some level of brain dead.
Yeah, it's very clear that from the earliest sources we have mentioning it, that it's Uru Shalim, or fire or light of the god Shalim, the god of the dusk. I'm not mistaken.
Is it possible it could also be like Uruv, like as derived from like Ir, like city?
That's possible. I could see that.
What?
It's very ambiguous, obviously. In these earlier texts, it's in the gloss of Egyptian. So Egypt was an Afro-Asiatic language, but they had issues with a lot of Semitic words. Ironically, they had a hard time pronouncing some letters that are very common in Semitic languages.
Was one of them Ra?
Huh? Yes. Or
Yeah.
sometimes. Not as much. No, that was one of the ones that they didn't really have much issue with. But one of the big ones they have issues with is lam. There's no lam in Egyptian, and there is no zain in Egyptian. So when you see any Canaanite name like Zimreda, it would be Jimreda.
Wow.
Jimrat. Or if you see Zakar Baal, it'd be Jekar Baal. Jekar Baal.
Interesting. So one who remembers is a joker.
Yeah, the checker.
Wait, so you think that's connected to the name of the Jeker?
I would be surprised if it wasn't.
So
Or
wait,
it could be conflated. It could be that the Egyptians were just wrongfully conflating two groups, the Jeker and the name Zakar, which is Semitic.
also before I forget, let's see. So let's see. This could get interesting. Nabu is in Jordan. Yeah, it's interesting because one of the like explanations for why we don't know where Moses is buried is because then the Israelites would have wanted to go back and like visit his place, and it would have become a shrine. But like at the end of the day, it seems like more than anything, it's trying to go past it. It's like, oh yeah, it's named Mount Nebo, but you just ignore that. We're in the Holy Land now. Don't pay attention to these names that have connections to other, but even that's like the idea of other or non-monotheist traditions. None of this would have made any sense to the people living at the time.
Yeah, because like, to be honest, there was no separation between Israelite and everyone else. They were just everyone else. It's just they were just one of those migratory semi-nomadic tribes that was going around in the Bronze Age and then into the Iron Age, like the Amorites and the Arameans, whatnot. That there was nothing really anything. The most transgressive things you can say about the Jews and the Israelites is that they weren't anything special. They're just anyone can like have all sorts of conspiracy theories, but the transgression is like, they're just everyone else. They're just like everyone else, nothing special, just normal.
Oh, but careful! Don't either let the Philo or the anti-Semites hear you say that.
Yeah,
it's like, how dare you say that the Jews are just normal people like everybody else?
Yes, that's the most transgressive thing I ever say.
So, wait, what was it? I just had it on the top of my head. Is it? Yeah. So, when it comes to this idea of like monotheism, I tend to think that it really comes about in the Persian era more than anything. But what are your thoughts on like predecessors to such concepts within ancient Egypt, like within Amarna?
So when we're talking about the Amarna period and Akhenaten, it's actually very clearly not monotheistic, but it is not henotheistic in the sense that every cult, just the state cult, was just one out of many equally respected cults. The state cult of Akhenaten was transgressive against all the other cults. There were destructions of temples of other deities. So Akhenaten, there's a reason why the Egyptians immediately tried to erase him from history after he died. He caused a lot of trouble. So not just, with his wasteful building projects in a very pragmatic sense, but by doing all this damage that is actually measurable in all these cult sites in Egypt, in Karnak, and all these, particularly in Upper Egypt, but also in Lower Egypt, that he persecuted other religions. I think this may be the connection. The one thing, well, it's a thing that's coming into the Iron Age. because in the Middle Bronze Age and in the Late Bronze Age, for the most part, everyone had their head god and their state god, So there's the head god, who's the person who the individual has a close relationship with on a personal and individualistic level. And then there's the state god, who is the god of the state. And obviously, that would receive a lot of the finance of the state and receive tithes and state support, like the cult of Dagon and Baal in Ugarit, for example, and many other such cult centers. But what Akhenaten did, I think that really carried through into the Iron Age, was harmonizing the head god and the state god. And while he did not deny that the other gods existed, he physically violated their temples and brought persecution to the worshippers of the other gods and appropriated their property, of course.
So, do you think that serves as a type of essentially a model for, because the thing is that like the whole idea that the Exodus narrative really only comes about with the I forget exactly when people think that when most scholars think that it was that came about, but probably that because there's a lot of really eerie echoes or parallels between the Exodus story and history that did happen. But the problem is that people view it on a literal level, and so they end up missing the history that for instance, like you're looking for the pots and pans and all the all the archaeological remains of the people in the desert. You're not going to find it, because the problem is the desert they were in, or well, first of all, that word for desert, midbar, also means wilderness. More directly means wilderness, and you have this idea that within the internal narrative, that they're going to the wilderness so that they can sacrifice to their god, who, if they sacrifice in Egypt, they would be killed, because they're sacrificing goats. And especially with the fact that the Jewish temple at the Israelite temple at Elephantine, which might more accurately be called a Canaanite temple, and then later that's the thing that I think is really interesting. Basically whatever process ends up having certain Canaanites continue being Canaanites and certain Canaanites identifying as Israelites.
It's a very ambiguous thing. Obviously, there is a minimalist view that none of this stuff happens. It's all made up, all fairy tales, it's all myth, it isn't real. And then there's the other completely equally ridiculous claim that it's all true. Now, obviously, these stories came from somewhere. There was a context where hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Canaanites were residing in Egypt, many of them as slaves, both in the Canaanite Delta, which was actually maybe not majority Canaanite, but substantially Canaanite, kind of in the same way that the South in the United States has a large section that is very, very predominantly, African American, or the Southwest has a lot of areas that are predominantly Mexican American. It's the same deal with the Canaanite Delta of the Nile.
Well, almost like New York and Jews. It's kind of interesting, because Alexandria later on kind of becomes that very idea.
Mm-hmm. So there was a context of Northwest Semitic peoples residing in Egypt, and they played a very significant part in the administration of Egypt's empire, both in its colonies in Nubia and in Canaan, but also domestically. There were many viziers who have names that are very clearly of Canaanite origin. One of the examples that I find interesting is the vizier of Amenhotep III, whose name was Aperel in Egyptian, which was almost certainly Abdi-El, which was a Canaanite name, but he tried to kind of erase his Canaanite-ness, try to identify more as Egyptian. And obviously the whole 19th dynasty, the Ramesside dynasty, Ramses I, Seti I, Ramses II, these were Delta Canaanites who homogenized Canaanite beliefs with Egyptian beliefs in a way that leaned towards the Egyptian. But it's not difficult to believe that there was a population of Delta Canaanites that took it in a more Canaanite direction or took influence from Akhenaten's religious reforms to have a sort of more imposed henotheism or a tight cult of henotheism that may have come out of Egypt and interacted with the Shasu of Yahu, and that may well have been an origin place for the Israelite worship of Yahweh. But we can't know for sure because it's a long time ago. It's ambiguous. It's not as if there was a historian going around like Thucydides saying, oh, and this happened, and this is why this happened, blah, blah, blah. No, we're kind of piecing it together from the puzzle pieces we have.
So have you read any of Manetho's commentary on that type of thing?
Yeah. So it's Manetho, whether he's correct or not, basically identifies Akhenaten with Moses and says that the Egyptians drove him out of Egypt for his loathsome practices and brought them and forced him into Canaan. And that's the origin, according to Manetho, of the Hebrew people. I don't think that Manetho's account is necessarily credible, but it is definitely something that was a belief that existed in the Hellenistic period and had, most likely, it was a record of related to memories, like oral traditions, and probably writings that haven't survived about the relationship between Egyptians and Israelites during the Iron Age in particular, because there were conflicts, but there were also periods of alliance. It was very clear that Egypt recognized that they had a relationship with the Israelites in Judah and Israel, the kingdoms of such, that transcended in their relationship with any of the other Levantine states during the Iron Age.
Interesting. So it's almost like kind of the connection between the United States of America and Mexico. Like they're both in America, but you have these kind of shifting borders, and with that comes a shifting population.
Mm-hmm. And there is a very clear Egyptian influence on specifically the names of Levites in the biblical narrative. Like Phineas is almost directly taken from Pinchas, which Penhesi, which was a very common Egyptian name.
Interesting, and it's fascinating. So you have that, that name, it's taken from Egyptian, but then it ends up being translated or ideologized into Semitic as Pe, the mouth, Nachash, of the serpent, which also has these callbacks to the Eden myth, which from what I've seen was probably the serpent was originally a guardian rather than an opponent or
in the ancient Near East, they placed a big significance on these sort of puns, these ways that words interact in different languages. This was very, very key to the philosophy and magical systems of the Babylonians and the Akkadians. I think I had a book about that. Yeah. So if anyone's interested in looking at more of that concept in detail, I can plug this book. It's called Philosophy Before the Greeks, The Pursuit of Truth in Ancient Babylon by Mark van de Meroep. Good Dutch name. It's a dry read, but if you like the ways that the ancient Near Eastern people connected words, which you still get a lot of today, is this word like that word in that language? They were doing that 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, too. It's a long tradition of signified meaning, which was assigned spiritual and magical power.
So, actually, that just kind of made me think of something else. So, I've been trying to, according to, the cycle of Torah reading, the book of Exodus just finished. And something that I ended up realizing as I started Leviticus, which also just kind of reading in Hebrew, it's made me realize how strange it, for instance, so the book of Leviticus is Vayikra. It means and he called out, or and he called. And it just seems so interesting that for whatever reason that ends up being understood as the name of the entire book, Whereas like Leviticus maybe makes a bit more sense, but it's like for that to be in Hebrew, it'd be like Leviim or whatever. But anyway, to get to the part that's like significant, I realized that a lot of the different offerings that are given in the temple, which kind of supports this idea that originally it wasn't just dedicated to one. You have a bunch of different names that are used. So you have like the tzedek offerings, or which you could either interpret as like the justice offerings or like maybe the righteousness offerings, but without trying to figure out an explanation. The most common or the most obvious thing would maybe be it's an offering to tzedek.
Yeah, the Semitic deity tzedek, which
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wondering if it's kind of like they chose purposely ambiguous language, because there were probably multiple types of Israelites who performed these roles in the temple. And the ones who were the hard henotheists, the one who are like, Yahweh or the highway, they could rationalize it in the way they do rationalize it. Oh, it means the righteous. But the ones who are the knowing ones, the ones who know that it's about polytheism, will know quietly.
Exactly, and it's interesting, and I'll pull this up in a moment, but I just wanted to bring this up. So, there's this what do you know what one of the other names for matzah is called?
What's the other name for matzah?
Besides
cardboard. Besides the indigestion suggestion.
Oh, also real quick. So Munchie Chef asked, "Is Ariel wearing a keffiyeh?" So technically, yes. It's also a sudra, and I ended up this is a history that really interests me. But basically, so the one of the theories is that the keffiyeh is from Kufa, from Iraq, and so it's something that it's become very much synonymous with like Middle Eastern, North African culture, but probably starts off in Mesopotamia, and it's even been seen in inscriptions going back to I think Sumeria, but basically, so Jews, Muslims, pagans, everybody in that region wore a sudra, and so it's something that I think is kind of a symbol of unity, especially in such trying, such atrocious times. But beyond that, it's also that when there's when a lot of anti-Semitism started factoring the shit with Kanye. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, I actually one time I came out of my synagogue, and some guy was just walking by and starts asking me about Jews in Hollywood. And I'm kind of like deer in the headlights, but I was also trying to explain to him basically that how marginalized groups end up kind of finding their niches in different places, but not he wasn't I felt nervous, but I didn't feel like he was an anti-Semite. It was more so just that you have a lot of stuff that was bubbling over, and so it's the type of thing where I felt like it was better to just address it. Hey Graham, but yeah, I felt that it was better to just address it than to just ignore it and be because it's one of those things where at the end of the day, there's really nothing you can say that's going to convince people that it's not the case. But it's I think there's certain things where it's better to at least talk with someone. But then again, it was just me. It was late at night. So, but anyway, moving on. So lachma anya, or the bread of anya, or and so I think it's derived from ana, which is affliction. But what's interesting is affliction, bow down or afflicted. This is also most likely the root of anat. Be poor, afflicted, humble, or meek. It gets understood as something which one inflicts upon themselves. So this idea of whether it's fasting or whatever, but most directly it's this idea of affliction itself, and that definitely does connect to here. You even see enut. Enut is affliction. Drop the vav, you get a knot. And so
if you cross a knot, you'll get afflicted. That's a suitable name for a lot of things that are in Hebrew. Kind of were named as a response to them being significant in another language or in other Semitic languages.
Wow. Speaking of that, you could not have said that at a more perfect time. they end up taking the root ana, and in Ezra, which notice this Ezra, this is already by the Persian era. It's being like changed, or not changed, but it's being was it like twisted, or not twisted, but like it's being manifested or expressed as ta'anit, which means humiliation by fasting. Which is like, okay, you literally have a Phoenician or like a Punic goddess named Tanit. Like, come on, this cannot be
well,
or I mean, it can be.
The same principles of linguistics worked in antiquity as they did now. People would make jokes about other people's names, and eventually it become all hoity-toity. You talk about a Pyrrhic victory. Well, that was a sick burn, when Pyrrhus was still alive. And if you make someone's, goddess into like this gross thing, that was something that was very intentional. I thought of an interesting example because I've been very close to Moroccan culture a lot. I lived in Morocco for well over a year. And one of the Canaanite deities is Kothar wa Khassis. And both of those words mean something in Moroccan Arabic. Kothar is the name of the river that's in paradise in Islam. And Khassis means rubbish or garbage.
Oh, but do you know why that is? And this is actually, this is just amazing how this connects. So do you know why chassis means garbage?
Why?
Because it means that contextually it gets interpreted as that which is thrown away or that which falls away. But that same root actually, I just had it. I'm trying to find. Okay, wait. Here is it. Yeah, here. So going to chasas or chashash rather, and I mean, any idea what other word is also derived from that?
Well, the Kothar wa Khassis is usually translated in the text that I've seen as crafty and skillful. So
yeah, I suspect it's probably two different. Wait, maybe it's this idea of chashash, which is hasten or hurry, like you can do it quickly because you're skilled. I don't know, like that's just a guess. But here it has particles of straw, sand, or dust as flying quickly about. Chashash, chaff. You conceive chaff, you bring forth stubble. But wait, what's this? Flaming chaff sinketh down. Basically, what I'm trying to bring up here is that chashash, it means that which like falls away. It's like it sinks down, referring to probably fine particles. And this is actually most likely connected. So this is probably connected to the root ashish, but also because hashish could also either be from chashash or from ashash, which is and there is a kind of a similarity between chashash and ashash, because one what is it? Ashash means like particles or like things which are pressed together, whereas chashash means that like these tiny particles. And so it might have to do with this idea that hashish is made from the keef, from the which is fascinating. Even the term keef comes from the Arabic as well as, I mean, just Semitic, the kaif, which means like fun or enjoyment.
And chassis, Khothar wa Khassis is also associated in the Baal text with holy smoke and holy flame, where he lights the temple the palace of Baal on fire, and then the bricks turn into gold and the blocks of stone turn into silver.
Wow, that's a
connection before.
So, because I wonder that, because I thought Qatar, it could be because so there's a few possible depending on how it's spelled, and there's also the difficulty when you're dealing with something like in Ugari, because it's not a direct like obviously it corresponds, but it's harder to see the correspondence unless you already know like cuneiform. But let's see, so Qatar actually ends up and kind of ties in with the whole idea of like the Egyptian quote unquote monotheism that we were talking about before. Because like, how familiar are you with the idea of like the 10 Sefirot or like the idea of Kabbalah?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I'm not 40 years old yet, so I can't study it.
So that actually only came about because of Shabbatai Tzvi. But so Qatar means to surround, to wait, hope for, which await, remain. That almost seems like it might be connected to the like kotarot, like the star, the seven, or was it 7 stars, like the Pleiades? Because they're called the kotarot. But you also have Keter, which means crown, and so Keter is like the highest emanation of God within the. And what's fascinating is a lot of them actually end up corresponding to other traditions as well. But so Koteret also is like capital of the pillar. But the reason I brought this, oh wait, was it? Oh no, so but if you look at a different Keter, with starting with a kuf and also as a tet, it actually is the same root that ends up lending itself to oh my god, how am I blanking on it? To Ketoret. Because this Keter, Assyrian Kutru, with a apparently the Assyrian is with the Toph, but it means smoke, a thick smoke, set of fire, usually exhaled odor, especially of roasted meat, thick smoke of sacrifice, but it's also incense smoke, which is kind of connecting to what you were talking about.
Yep. Well, it could be incense. It could be something else.
And I mean, it is kind of, if you look at the way that it describes, so whenever so there's an incense that's offered on the altar, but there's also the meats, like the sacrifices, and it's referred to as a reach nichoach, like a most pleasant smell, or like a very like delicious smell, for lack of a better term, like
maybe a savory smell.
Savory smell for Adonai, which I mean, even that it's kind of a okay. Well, what's it mean Adonai? Because it says Yod He Vav He, but it's read Adonai, and it's that's itself kind of like lends to a few more questions. But basically, that this idea, and I think this is something that probably goes back to this more ancient type of religion, which ended up being done away with. But then it's kind of like that doing away with gets used to also do away with things that may or may not have had anything to do with it. Basically, getting rid of it's like, okay, we're going to do away with these quote unquote atrocious practices, but in the meantime, we're also going to do away with other things and then correspond these things that are being done away with the atrocious practices. So something like human sacrifice, and then it's like, oh, well, don't you know they were human sacrificing to these gods, ignoring that they were also human sacrificing to their god.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like I thought of like a very good way to begin my video on human sacrifice in ancient Canaan is I take the text and say, consecrate all your firstborns to Baal. And like, oh, yeah, this is proof that Baal orders human sacrifice. Oh, nope, actually, I just changed the names. This was for Yahweh. Because there's no text that's that explicit about Baal. You can make an ambiguous claim whether there may have been human sacrifice in the Canaanite religion, but there obviously must have been something going on in the Israelite religion, because even in Leviticus, after all the editing, all the cleaning, they're still mentioning consecration of the firstborn with no substitution.
Though, is there any possibility that the consecration is a dedication of like as a priest?
Well, like I said, they will make that claim for themselves, but they wouldn't have made that claims for us. If they had found a rock somewhere in Syria that said the same thing, the same exact words about Baal, they would not be saying that.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's one and the same. So it's like they either none of them were human sacrificing, or they both were.
Yeah, and also infant mortality was very, very high in the ancient world. It's very possible that like what they mean, but what we see with these Tophets in North Africa and in Tel Gezer, because there were, the charred remains of infants under the pillars in Tel Gezer, was very likely natural death and was seen as sending the gods back, sending the children back to the gods. No, there was not definitely human sacrifice in the Phoenician religion. I'm sorry, Mr. Graham Pong.
I mean, I think it's also because
ambiguous.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what there is definitely is there's definitely remains that have been found in ritual context. The question is how they were killed, why they died.
Yeah, I was like, I would say the fact that there were so many fetuses and miscarriages in the Tophets, in Motia, and other Phoenician sites pretty strongly indicates, and on top of that, there being no burial sites with, otherwise for youths in those sites, it strongly indicates that this was just a standard burial practice for children who died naturally and were just brought back to the gods.
Also, yep. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's just my interpretation, and it's interesting. What peoples are recording these blood libel myths about the Phoenicians? It's the Greeks and the Romans. And who did they do next when there weren't so many Phoenicians around? These Greeks and the Romans.
The Jews and the Christians.
So the Jews, so after they became Christian, all these blood libel myths that were invented and invoked by ignorant people against the Phoenicians just was the birth of the blood libel myth against the Jews. It's a general thing against the Semitic people that got passed on.
It's kind of interesting because, and it's one of those things where it's like a cultural relativism. Like, even if that was happening, the Greeks were literally exposing children on mountains, but it's like, oh, but we're not doing it as a sacrifice to the gods because that's abhorrent. But it's like one of those things where it's like, I think we can recognize that it's kind of equally abhorrent if you're leaving out a child to die of, exposure to the elements, or if you're sacrificing them to a god. And again, it's one of those things where, like, I think people need to recognize that just because a tradition did something in the past doesn't mean that's imagine all the things that have happened in the past, and then essentially no tradition has clean hands. So it's more so about viewing how traditions evolve. And unfortunately, with something like the Canaanite tradition, it never really had the chance to evolve past a certain point because almost all its influence got swept up within monotheistic traditions, like in various ways. Almost like I'd liken it to this idea of you have something, you can't get rid of that something, but you can transform it. And so it'll either continue to exist as it was, or if it gets transformed, people might see it as disappearing, but it's still there. It's kind of like how, you have the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, the Egyptians, all the people in that region. Like, you have changes in who rules over them. You have changes in what those regions are called, but like the people, like they're there, and the traditions, they might, it might be like, oh, well, we worship this god now versus, 1,000 years later, it might be this. But at the end of the day, you still have those Phoenician, those Canaanite traditions preserved within within elements of, and like the way that I've argued, like, for as long as I've come up with this theory, I think there is something to it, that Judaism in a lot of ways, and again, there's one thing that I think people might either get lost on, is like, oh, well, only believe in one God, or view it like, what I don't know what the other thing I was going with, but it's almost like, I really think this idea that because there is this internal narrative within Judaism that every tradition, like the miracles that they have, that they're like, that it's not that these people are deluded. They, like, these miracles or what they experience, they are witnessing these things. But the idea, which I think is just, if people read between the lines, that the things they're experiencing are real, but that ultimately this power is coming from, the one true God, which, again, if you read between the lines, is it referring to this idea that there's this, essentially this first cause, which is not that different from elements you see in Phoenician tradition, but then what is different is essentially, like, imagine you have a game of Guess Who, and you have one person at the top of the board, and then you have a bunch of people below them, and for whatever reason, you end up saying, okay, God is, or like, I'm thinking of a person, and then you end up doing it so that you basically put them all face down. You still have, you can see the tiles there, but you don't see their faces. You don't see like their names or whatever, except for one person. So it's like, they're all still there. They're just kind of done away with. And I think a big reason why this perspective might have gotten lost has to do with the fact that, the reason why it got lost has to do with the Christianization of Rome. because the moment that you have the like an increasing perspective that, you know, there's like one God that you're supposed to worship, but it gets to the point where it's not just one God and you're supposed to worship, but eventually it's like, okay, because it becomes a matter of political power, you can only worship this one God, otherwise you're a heretic, or otherwise you're, you know, you're doing something wrong. And by doing that, it then makes it where Christians and Jews are now living in the backdrop of a monotheistic society, or rather like a quote unquote Abrahamic society, as opposed to having to, you know, exist as a quote unquote, you know, henotheistic or monolatrous society amongst people who aren't that way. But even then, there's so much evidence that Jews and Christians were not solely monotheistic or monolatrous, even in the ancient world. I mean, especially in the Hellenistic era. But one second, before we go on, let's see. Goat T says, I don't think that blood libel is a myth. Look at how many children have drone striking Gaza. But again, this is something that it's horrible, but are you going to say that this is being done for some ritual purpose? I think that's asinine. It's being done for political power.
Yeah, that's the truth. Is there's not any connection between, you know, any sort of Canaanite religion and the Zionist state. In fact, they're trying to wipe that out. They were targeting members of the Canaanite religion that I had contacted with just after I visited, because there's this awakening of Canaanite identity in Palestine that it's just been really exploding because of the extent to which the Israelis have connected, you know, and justified their atrocities against Gazans and against Palestinians in general by, oh no, they're Muslims, they're all terrorists. I'm like, no, we're not all Muslims. There's Christians here, and some of us, we follow our indigenous religion. And that's been a big movement in the Palestinian, you know, that's a movement I'm actually more connected with. And that brings me to a topic I want to ask you about.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are a practicing Jew.
Mm-hmm.
You're not Jewish. You're Jewish. I'm Jewish. So I'm a Jewish adjacent. But I am a Canaanite practitioner. You're actually Jewish, but you worship Asherah. Well, what's your practice like? What do you do to, you know, as a practicing Jew who worships Asherah?
Well, so I mean, I guess on one hand, it's like part of it's like I'm trying to, you know, I mean, to prove to myself, but also to others that there doesn't need to be this like paradox. Because for one, I think that the way that and I mean, this is something that this is like, I will argue this till the, you know, till the day is done, that and again, I feel like some people might look at this as disparaging. I think that it's only becomes an issue once you have this overarching control, because like I don't know, but basically that with the advent of Islam, you start to have this idea of monotheism that I don't think exists before then. And as a result, it's like the Christians and the Jews either feel upstaged, or in some cases might actually have to adapt to those norms. Or at the very least, the Jews and Christians that did adopt to the norms of, you know, more monotheism ended up surviving better, just because they were able to, you know, exist more easily in those societies. And you end up seeing a similar thing with not so many Muslims living under Christian rule, just because of how antagonist things got, except for during some periods and in some regions. But like you have a lot more Jews being forced to live under Christian control. And I really think that by that time, you already have Christians trying to copy Islamic norms of monotheism, just because it's this idea, you know, they don't want to be upstaged. It's like, oh, you know, no, we have one guy, you know, it's this idea of like they, you know, basically proving that you're just as good, if not better than the others. And so I think that's really what ends up doing away with this idea that, like, even considering that the angels of, you know, the quote unquote monotheistic tradition might actually be the gods of the older traditions, because I mean, you know, people don't stop referring to God as El, or as or as Adon, or, you know, Adonai. I mean, there's even a part of I forget where I was reading this, but it literally refers to you know, the quote unquote God of the Bible as Adon Haaretz, or Adon like the one who founded the earth, but it uses the name Adon. It it's not Adon. It's not like Adoni, like the Lord who founded the world. It's Adon, which again kind of raises the question of who is Adon. But sorry, I'm kind of losing track of what I was saying. What was it? Oh right. Before. Oh yeah. Kind of also touching on what we were saying. So Les Wiseman says apicorsim. So it's interesting. Do you know what apikoros means?
Yes, it means that we are the Hellenistic Jews. That means we are the Jews who are all, oh yeah, we're not like you other folks. We're like the good old Greeks. We have science and philosophy. That's the thing. Is it too academic? That's a term that's evolved over time because it obviously comes from Epicurus.
Yeah. It's funny because like at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure I'm not Epicurean, but it ends up. But though it's funny because now Epicurus means heretic, whereas heretic used to be minim, which actually even what's heresy mean? It means choice.
Mm-hmm.
But what was it? So
but I'm not an Epicurus because I'm not Jewish. I'm only Jew-ish.
Yeah. So
I make idols, even Say hello to my little friend.
It's kind of interesting because this idea of like idols, I mean, at the end of the day, like what is an idol? Is it something that you believe is God, or is it a representation? Because at the end of the day, I don't think there were, I mean, I'm sure, I don't want to exclude any tradition, but as a generality, it seems like most concepts of idols were simply representation, or like a vessel, no different than something like the Ark of the Covenant or the menorah, or even
Black
just
rocks.
Oh yeah. I find it hilarious when you have like Christians like looking at Islam and they're like, oh, this is evil because they're worshiping a rock. It's like, do you not realize that, first of all, they're not worshiping it, they're revering it. Second of all, do you realize that this is not something that's at all? I mean, it's literally can we just address this? You have people who are criticizing Muslims for revering a rock. Well, they're literally revering something made out of wood, a cross.
Yeah, it's a big hypocrisy. The problem is everyone wants to be monotheist because somehow it's like kind of like everyone wanted to be like, oh, we're democratic republic. We have democracy. We have elections, even if it's bullshit. But I guess that's the thing. Like everyone wants to be monotheist, but they don't want to actually be really hardcore monotheist. They just want to pretend they are. I'm the opposite. I would worship a duck. At least they taste good.
A duck?
Yeah, I'd worship a duck.
Yeah, but wait. So would you end up being like like eat of my body, drink of my blood? Like duck blood soup, and
Mm-hmm.
But let's see. So Graham responded. So here. We have the record of the Phoenician nobles sacrificing their children. Are you claiming that ancient source, which is corroborated by archaeology in Carthage, is wrong?
I'm saying that it could be. It's that I'm saying that there are much better explanations for it, because the ancient sources about the Phoenicians and the Carthaginians was from the Greeks and the Romans, who liked fighting the Carthaginians quite a bit. And it was a very easy thing to misunderstand with this particular explanation that actually has been corroborated by archaeology, because these were stillbirths. These were stillbirthed children and miscarried children, along with children who died. This is a much better explanation, and it doesn't, play into negative and hurtful stereotypes. Now, of course, like the Carthaginians were these horrible imperialists, scumbags who killed the Amazigh and were very brutal in Spain and in Sicily. They had enough of their own dirt. You don't have to go manufacture religious dirt on them to make them look bad. By the way, I think Hannibal is really overrated. That's my other hot take. Sorry, Tunisians. Hannibal is overrated.
Okay. Also, it's hilarious because a lot of people do not realize that Hannibal is basically, if you were to replace the name Baal with L, you know what you get? Haniel. Like, and that's actually one of the name. It's kind of funny. That's the name of, like, according to tradition, that's the name of the angel associated with the sphere of like victory, or like this idea of endurance, overcoming, which is kind of funny because of Hannibal. But the other thing is that right. So then Graham said, you seem to be assuming the Phoenicians did not perform human sacrifice, which would have made them aliens in the ancient world, as well as contradicting the archaeology and the written records. So I mean, like, within this context of, human sacrifice in the ancient world, it's definitely something that happened, but there, and again, not to justify it, but it does seem like there was a bit of like an element of that had to do with what's the word? Like, I think is the term austerity measures, like basically when they didn't have enough food. This actually happened in medieval Germany. That's part of the origin of the story of Hansel and Gretel, was that there was a point where there was like a population boom because the region was very fertile. But then during the same like mini ice age that caused the Huns, or was it the Huns or the the Turkic tribes, the Mongols, to go further west and end up invading Europe and the Middle East. That the same mini ice age that caused that is what caused this giant die-off of crops in the winter in Europe, specifically in like Germany and in Germanic lands. And because of that, they didn't have enough food, and a lot of families ended up having to choose: are they all going to starve, or are they going to sacrifice one kid so that they can all live? And it's dark. I mean, it's something that people kind of forgot about collectively, but it got enshrined in the tradition of Hansel and Gretel, because when I heard this just fascinated me. But because like, I feel like timing, a lot of people don't pay enough attention to timing, but in the original version, when at the same moment that that Hansel and Gretel end up like tricking the witch and getting her, like basically shoving her in the oven instead of them being cooked in the oven, at that same moment is actually when their mom dies. And so apparently, like, the original narrative has something to do with the mom getting the dad to, or no, I forget exactly, but the dad sending the kids away so that they that they'll be able to live, or so they won't have to kill him or something. But then they end up stumbling back, and it's wild.
Yeah. Interesting story, Hamsel and Gramsel. Anyway, I might be pronouncing that wrong. Maybe it's Himsel and Grimsel or something. Anyway, I have a notoriety of not being able to pronounce words. So I was going to touching back to the biblical stuff. The siege of Samaria, which is mentioned in Kings, they had just such an example, that when Samaria was under siege by the Arameans under Ben-Hadad, that they killed their children and ate them. And like, yeah, of course, because who is the most vulnerable population in deprivation, in sieges? Children. And they're vulnerable not just because they are medically vulnerable or physiologically vulnerable. They will grow up misdeveloped if they even survive the famine because of their vulnerability. They will be permanently damaged as an individual if they go through famine at that age. And secondarily, they are vulnerable in the sense that they are vulnerable to inter-community violence. And to bring this to Gaza, which is currently under siege, that's what it is. It's a siege and bombardment with the supplies. It seems like Western countries, otherwise well-meaning people, are sending them these food aid, but the way that it's being delivered seems to intentionally be causing more casualties among Palestinians. That they're doing these airdrops, and I've never seen airdrops that are that fast, that forceful, that they're exploding and killing people when they fall, or that they're bringing them and then people are fighting over it. People are dying in violence because of the inadequate ways that food aid is being sent to Gaza. And it seems like a way of causing casualties and conflict among the besieged territory, while pretending that these Western countries have their hands clean when it's very clear that they are supporting the genocide committed by Israel.
Yeah. My what was this? I'm trying to think. It would have been my great uncle, or it would have been my grandmother's uncle. So so part of my grandmother, her family, not like so her family managed, like immediate family managed to escape to Colombia before the war, but her uncle, his name was Srulik, which is it's a nickname for Israel, but he managed to survive the war. He survived one of the camps. I forget which one, but I think this was in Romania and I think Transnistria. But after the war, he ended up actually being killed by another Jew who survived over a sack of potatoes. And like that's something that I feel like a lot of people don't realize, that like people will end up using examples like that to dehumanize the people who are starving. It's like, oh, look at them, they'll fight. And I see that going on right now. It's like people, it's like you aren't you when you're hungry, and it's not.
That's exactly right. And even in like the most superficial sense, before lunch, when people go to the judge for their what's the word? For their dang it. Like, well, they're hearing, so they're in jail, and they're gonna see whether they go released from jail with conditions or stay in jail. It starts with a P.
Parole.
Their parole hearing. If the judge has eaten before their parole hearing, they're more likely to get paroled. And if the judge hasn't eaten, it's before lunch, they're far less likely. All other variables considered, they won't get parole because the judge is angry.
Interesting. I wonder how much that also connects potentially to the development of the idea of offering food sacrifices in order to appease a god.
Probably. I'm wondering, I do offer food sacrifices as a part of my religious practice. I don't know if you do that, but I do that because I try my best within the limitations that I have to respect these Canaanite traditions. But I'm thinking that people are always confused about why we propitiate the gods with sacrifice. And I never really had a good answer for it. I guess it's just, we do this because we do this. Like a lot of things, but I bet there is a really good reason, and I'm just too ignorant to know the answer.
I mean, I'm sure a functionalist materialist would be like, oh, well, maybe it has something to do with, you leave food out so that like if there's like flies or something that would spread disease, or like any animal that would spread disease, like you're leaving this food out. Because I mean, realistically, if you eat an offering out, like a food offering out, and then you see an animal eating it, you're not going to, like, imagine you go up to the animal, you shoo it away. It's like, no, this is for the gods. It's like you're missing the point if you're doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I think is another thing about the sacrifices, particularly in the classical world, the Greco-Roman tradition, and I'm pretty sure they would have had much the same thing in the ancient Near East, is it was a social and political engagement sort of thing. People would get together for the festival, and that would be the time that they'd eat meat, and they'd have a big barbecue and the full heifer harvest, killing the red heifer. That guy really wanted me to say that, but you kill this special animal, barbecue it up, you give it to the people, and then people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And I think, obviously churches do that. They do a lot of barbecues. I think the state should do more about that. More barbecues. We need more grilled meats, more grilling and smoking these meats.
Yeah, is July 4th not enough?
No, it's not enough. And it has to be a big thing where everyone gets off work, everyone comes to the square, they kill a lot of animals, and then they grill them up. Maybe they have like some tofu for some weirdo vegetarians.
Yeah, in America, I feel like it would end up being something like you get someone driving a tank. You get the president driving a tank, and they end up rolling over a bunch of animals, like in his sacrificial. It's like a mix of the Roman Triumph and Monster Car Rally.
I think the modern day Roman Triumph is that weird stuff that they do in Russia. with the tanks, and they're all marching. Do, 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 do.
Really? I thought it was the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
It could be, but a triumph is a very much like a military thing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Well, apart from the Islamic world, Russia is really the heir to Rome. America has nothing to do with Rome, apart from they're falling into some of the same stupid mistakes when it comes to inequality and republicanism that Rome did.
It's kind of saying, yep. Sorry, go ahead.
Because they can't read a history. They read a history book. They read this. I'm sure they read, I'm sure they read all of the history of Rome. They read Livy, Polybius, Tacitus, whatever. And then, and after that, they said, you know what? Why don't we, to prevent these failings that the Romans did, make the same mistakes that the Romans did, only harder?
Interesting. Oh,
that's what I kind of feel like with the stupid founding fathers. God, what a stupid cult.
Also,
sorry, Americans.
Also, before I forget, so Manchi Chef said hashash or hassas in Arabic means sensitive for what it's worth. Mutahassas means specialized. Fragrant incense. Gram says fragrant incense equals hashish.
Yeah, that's what we're getting at.
Yeah, Jeremy says interesting. Yeah. Oh.
Hi, Jeremy. Wait, I'm doing a little tango dance. It's not a tango dance. I think my pants are pulled far enough up.
Probably. Just make sure they're far enough up in case you get slapped too hard for the Akitu and then you fall over. And
let's talk about the Akitu. That's a fun thing to talk about.
Oh yeah, maybe get into that in a moment. I just there was one thing that I wanted just real quick. What was it? Let's see, Admetus, Center of the Solan Empire. This channel is so based 100%. I read what is the significance of the Red Heifer event in Judaism, and what's important. Actually, there's a perfect connection. So, well, for one, I've been seeing a lot of people like spreading stuff online. I'm going to be honest. I'm mainly seeing this from evangelical channels. Haven't seen a dang thing from. I mean, like. At the end of the day, I think there's people who's like, oh, they want to rebuild the temple. At the end of the day, they're just it's people trying to get clickbait over everything going on in with Israel.
The religious thing is overplayed with the Middle East. For the most part, it's the same social, economic, and political factors like everywhere else in the world.
Yeah, but what is interesting about this idea of the red heifer is, do you know where a heifer plays a huge role?
Well, obviously in sacrifice, but what else in Judaism specifically?
I'm actually not going for a parallel in Judaism here because the red heifer is the parallel.
Well, in the Canaanite religion, the heifer, to get to the weirdest part of the Canaanite religion,
I know.
You know what I mean.
That's why I'm referencing it.
Yeah, the most important things are usually the weird parts. So why did Baal fuck a cow? Why did Baal fuck a cow? Because it's a symbol. It's the symbolism of his sacrifice that he was from the low to the high. He was one of the lowliest of the gods. He went to the highest, went down to the lowliest of the low, and offered himself up, not even just for humanity, but for a humble cow, defending the cow. He faced death for a cow, for just some cows, And that's why he overcame death. He overcame death because he overcame his fear of death. And
I think something that, I brought this up when I was hanging out with some of my Catholic friends, and they agreed with me. They also saw the parallelism between the Baal cycle and the story of Jesus.
Yeah, it's a very prominent thing, especially with Lebanese Christians. They all pretty much recognize that Jesus is just Baal 2.0. Sorry, Christians. That's the quiet part. You're not supposed to say it out loud. But no, you're just like us. You just worship Baal, but he's a little bit cuter. He's got brown hair instead of black hair. He wears a little bit more clothes. He's not so skimpy in his little kilt anymore. But
the ironic thing is, there's this whole subset of like evangelical culture where it's like they're like, oh, don't like they'll either insert Jews or Muslims, but they're like, don't you know they actually worship Baal? It's like, don't you know
You are
everybody
the fucking
does?
Baal worshippers, dude. And I love that about Christians. Actually, most of their morality is just the same morality that we invented. The Baal worshippers invented.
So also another thing that a lot of people kind of going on this idea that there's Baal Shamin, there's Baal Hamon, there's Baal, Baal Eshmun, Baal Hadad, all these different Baals, but they're like, it's
They're balls to the walls.
Yeah, they're all balls in the same way that Mr. Smith, Mr. Green, Mr. White, Mr. Orange, I don't know, all these misters, they're all misters. And also another thing that, like, so that same idea of referring to someone as like a mister or a lord, you also have that even with Marduk, because what does Mar mean? It means lord.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's just really interesting stuff there with this idea that it's so the reason why people end up seeing Baal within such a negative negative sense, it's primarily because of Baal Zavuv, which was probably actually a like a demonization of Baal Zavul, like
Zabul.
yeah, so like what?
Yeah, Baal the prince, and apparently they said, "Where is the prince? Where is the prince?" That's the ritual chant that Baal worshippers have.
Izobal or Izevel.
Ayazabul, 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 just dusting yourself with ashes, cutting yourself. Teenagers would love that.
Yeah, maybe they're secretly Baal worshippers.
Yeah, I think that there is really something significant in human psyche that brings Baal back. Even if he weren't real, but he is. People are still going to worship him because it's so important to what human beings are. Everything that is Baal is manifested in every section of human life.
Yeah. So, what was it? Dang it, I just had it. Oh, right. So with Baal, but yeah. So you have Baal Zavul that gets demonized as Baal Zavuv, or like Lord Baal of the flies. But the one that really gets used to demonize Baal is the Baal Peor, which people end up interpreting as like a Baal that people worship through like defecation and like ritual sex and stuff, which I personally, it seems to me like that's a huge what's the word? It's like there it's not, I mean, it's obviously a demonization, but it's a they're
Desecration, maybe?
It's like they're making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah.
Because so it's from the fact that Peor means like opening, and so they're like, oh well, it's the Baal of the openings. So
well, what is the opening? The opening is the window in Baal's house, the symbolic opening that's in the sky that brings the life, But I guess you could say that the fertility could be connected to shit and piss. I could easily imagine there was a weird sect of Canaanites that worshipped Baal by peeing and shitting everywhere. There's weird groups in any religion, There's weird cannibal Hindus. Oh, you have the Baal epic open. So, and like, there's just the human thing. Like, have you ever suffered from constipation or a hemorrhoid?
I mean, like constipation.
Maybe on Passover when you eat matzah. No, I mean, like, when you're constipated and you have a hemorrhoid, you are screaming and cursing up to the gods when it's coming out. And like I said, that's a very natural thing. And I'm wondering, like, when something natural gets adopted into religion, people are going to notice it and like, oh, that's kind of funny. We're just going to make fun of you for that. But there's a meaningful side to that, just like with Baal fucking a cow.
Interesting. I mean, I guess on some level, it's also probably good to have an opening in your bathroom. Otherwise, it's going to really end up smelling.
Yeah. There's a question of, like, in the Bible and in ancient Near Eastern culture as well, about how far the cesspit should be from the community. That's one of the things I played with my book. How far should the cesspit be?
Interesting.
The opening of the shithole. And then they were also used. There's a scene in my book where they invade the fortress of Sharuhen through the toilet shaft.
Oh, yeah, and you have that.
And then you're gonna guess what that is paralleled to.
Yeah, Gideon.
Uh-huh.
Which also, you know what Gideon's real name was?
What?
Well, I have to look this up because I do not remember, but it's actually, this is fascinating. I never connected it to this before. So Gideon was also called Yerubal.
Yerubal.
Yeah. Baal will contend. Wow.
Yeah, a lot of these were Baal names, but they had to change it. And the ones that the Israelites liked, they changed their names to something like, Gideon. But the ones that they didn't like Eshbaal, they changed his name to Eshbosheth.
Yeah, which that Bosheth, the shame, it's used a lot to demonize. So like you have the same with Ashtoreth. It's a combination of Astarte Bosheth.
Mm-hmm, yes. Oh goodness. There was something that I was thinking. Oh, why don't we talk about the springtime holiday?
Oh, yeah.
Because in the Ugaritic tradition, they had the holiday of the Feast of the Gracious Gods, which was a sexual holiday, the Hieros Gamos. And there was a similar thing, like a myth of creation in Babylon that many Canaanites also practiced, the Akitu, and then there's Passover and Easter. I was wondering if you want to talk about some connections in your own personal practice as well, because I practice Akitu. That's my thing. I get my slap every year.
Let's see. So it's the Gracious Gods, you said?
Yeah, the Feast of the Gracious Gods. It's a ritual and mythic text from Ugarit, which would play out as a drama, a religious drama.
Let's see. The thing is, I have a book with it. I'm just trying to find a way to actually get it up here for.
When it comes to these sort of things, like I kind of have like a summary that it's probably better not to read the whole thing in this video because people get bored.
More so just to reference specific parts.
Yeah, the specific parts and how it relates to Judaism and the springtime holidays. In the Feast of the Gracious Gods, the tradition was you take a lamb of sacrifice and you seethe it in its mother's milk.
It's also something that I remember reading. It's also something that was a practice in, I think, Egypt, but yeah, isn't one of the reasons like it's thought to be that the milk was representative of the milk of motherhood, and then the flesh or the meat was representative of like the fruit of the womb.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, for sure. And there was it was in a springtime holiday because it's a rejuvenation of the spring. These are symbolic springtime holidays that, what was I thinking about? Oh, the myth of the gracious gods was a Hieros Gamos, that the god El, or just El, just God. His name just means God. He's just hiding from his dad, Shemuma. And this is actually referenced in Sekuniathon. He's hiding from his dad, and he starts grilling some meats. He's grilling these meats, as you do, grilling a bird on a stick. And some other birds, these two women are sent to give him a shank, for their daddy, who's also his daddy, Shemuma. But in the end, they ended up being seduced by the savory smell of the roasting bird. And it becomes this euphemism for sex. If a person is horny, they say, oh, he has a roasting bird.
Interesting. Wow. So I'm still trying to find like a PDF with it, but so the isn't with the gracious. Do you know what the term is for gracious God? Like the gracious, what the like?
I'm pretty sure it will be the same as any other. I don't like to refer to the. What are you looking for? For the KTU? No, I don't actually have that. I can maybe pull it up on my phone, but I really don't like going around the phone. I like to have like a loose style. People can look this up if they wanted. The Feast of the Gracious Gods or the Birth of the Gracious Gods. It's the same. It's a matter of like nomenclature. It's not as if like clay tablets had a title on them. Usually their title was just what was the first few words, You're talking about that with Exodus and the Enuma Elish. It's just the title because it's the first two words. and on high, from on high. Enuma Elish, that's the name of the title because it's the first two words, because what is the first thing you're going to look at?
Okay, here, I think I found at least part of it. So it's just, let's see. Okay, here. So it has a text here. I'm not going to read all of it. Okay, invitation. I would call on the gracious gods and beautiful sons of, and there's a lot that's unknown because I think they like.
A lot of lacuna. It's a big lacuna thing. Lacuna Matata, you know?
Interesting. Who have provided a city on high in the steppe land, on the barren hilltops on their heads, and eat the food, yes do. Drink the foaming wine, yes do. Give well-being to the king, give well-being to the queen, to those who enter and those who stand guard. Interesting. Mutu washaru. So that would mean Death the Prince, or like Prince Death?
Yeah, Prince Death, or Death the Hero. They usually translate it as Death the Hero. Or Moat the Hero. He's a hero because in their sense, you know, in the ancient sense, the Bronze Age sense, a hero does not imply anything moral, only that someone is good at killing. Like Achilles. And who's better at killing than death? You know that death is one of the leading causes of death.
Really? I would have never guessed.
You know what the secret to immortality is in Canaanite religion?
Not being born?
Well, no. Not dying.
Oh. That doesn't help.
Doesn't help much. I have no secret wisdom to give you. Just very, very easily available, kind of difficult to be available information, but you can find all this for yourself. I'm not this weird hooky-dooky sort of Gnostic charlatan, sort of like Shem McGram, casting sorcery spells out of my tuchus, making, I'm doing real research here. See, that has footnotes.
So real quick, just so we can catch up with all the comments, was because this I thought was really interesting. Oh, also, yeah, just addressing the idea of the red heifer. So basically the reason that I was bringing up, the whole Epic of Baal is because, he ends up mating with, I think it's 77 times with the heifer, but it's understood that, on one hand, so Baal ends up getting swallowed up by death, and then Anat kills death and spreads death, pulverizes death and spreads his remains like seed, and then Baal, because Baal was swallowed up by death, Baal rises with the rising of the grain. But what's interesting is there's also this implication that Baal returns every spring with a grain, but you also have this idea that potentially Baal can return through the heifer.
Mm-hmm. And here's the question: what's the son of the heifer's name?
Holy crap! Thank you for saying that.
Because that's the big connection there. Because there is extra biblical mention of Moses. It's the son of Baal by his cow hookup.
Wait, really?
Yeah, Moshe, literally Moshe is the name of the son of Baal after his cow hookup.
Where is this from? I've never heard of it.
In the Baal epic.
Holy crap. And that could also have something to do with why there was the golden calf.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, okay, this is Ben-Yom. Okay, this is really interesting because what you brought up with this idea of the son of the heifer.
Yeah. Maybe the Jews are the son of the heifer. I don't know. That might satisfy that weirdo who has sort of weird anti-Semitic undertones who keeps leaving that red heifer comment on my channel.
So Genesis, I think is it 48? It's the, okay, yeah. Here, I think I found it. So these are it's like the blessings that that Jacob is giving to, okay, so let's see. Wait. I might have gone too far. It was, okay. Okay, here it is. So we have to find the one for Joseph. Asher, Naphtali. Also, just something that's kind of interesting. Ma'asher Shmeina Lachmo. From Asher will be Shmeina Lachmo, like fattened or oiled bread. His bread will be oiled. V'hu yiten, and he will give Ma'adanei Melech, like delights or dainties of the king. which I personally think might be a reference to hashish production in the northern Alps, but that's a story for another time. So Ben Porat, the son of the Para, or like together would be Ben Porat, but Porat, here it says wild ass, and of course it's not loading now, which is annoying. But so Para is heifer, like Para Aduma is the red heifer. So it's saying Ben Parat Yosef, Ben Parat Yosef Ben Porat. It's saying Joseph, the son of a heifer. Joseph is the son of a heifer. Ale Ayin along along the fountains, or potentially the leaves of the along a fountain or a spring, but not Sa'ada, the daughters of this. I'm not alay sure. Like, I'm honestly, it's a very weird translation.
Sure. Sure like bull?
Yeah, it's connected to Tur as well, which apparently, so there's another part where it's referring to, I think, the Shalim offering, where you can offer either Turim or B'nai Yonah, and so Turim gets interpreted as either turtle doves or bulls, and then B'nai Yonah is the son of the dove. So it's probably that the Turim is actually referring to bulls, because I don't know, but that's but yeah. So basically, just addressing that this idea of a lot of people have this idea that the red heifer returning, or like finding the red heifer, has something to do with the return of the Messiah. And I mean, it's interesting, but ultimately, I think it does kind of fall back to some of these older traditions. The other thing, before I forgot, was, does the angel Michael or Gabriel come from pagan traditions? So I actually ended up finding a really interesting. So how much do you know about Reshef?
I would say that Reshef, he is obviously very important, especially with the Delta Canaanites, as symbolic, and with the coastal Canaanites as the father of Eshmun. He is the god of pestilence, also of flame. But as to the details about it, I'm sure you know something about it that I don't. Oops. This is a learning opportunity for both of us, right?
Yep. So,
Messiah, I'm just a very naughty boy.
So check this out. Reshef Mikal, primary name, Reshef Mikal, individual deity, Phoenician male, reminiscent of Phoenician god Melkart and Hercules, later equated with Apollo. Now notice this. Apollo, so it's being connected, and there's already been connections drawn between the angel Michael and Apollo. And so then you have one of the names or epithets of Reshef being Mikal, and like it's iffy, but there's enough connections, like oh sweet, what's this is from a blog post, but let's see. At the same time, it would strike me as presumptuous and even superstitious. How would God be pleased by a statue being tossed into a pit? What kind of god were they praying to? Who is Reshef Mikal? Apparently, according to one scholar, he was a god of smiting, often portrayed as armed and menacing. His name meaning flame, lightning, heat, pestilence, or inflammation. Redoubtable, awesome, terrifying, or fearsome. A great god, a god of the sky, an everlasting god, lord of arrows and pests. Notice the connection with the arrows.
I knew that he was connected with Apollo from that, because Apollo was originally a pestilence god, and you sort of see that in the Iliad. The very beginning of the Iliad, he's just shooting people down with his sick arrows.
And you also have that same thing with Reshef, because Reshef is both a disease god and a healing god.
Mm-hmm. It's duality, because there's death, and then there's also resurrection with Osiris, and Baal. And then there's everything has duality to it.
Yeah. And okay, so this is actually really interesting. So many theophoric names invoking Reshef have been identified in text from MR. Examples include Ikur Rashap. Akkadian Reshef has proven to be reliable. Rashap Kabar. Now, this is when I saw this. So Kabar means great. It's the same way. Same way that you get Allahu Akbar, which means Allah is greatest. But what's interesting is that Kabar and Gabar are probably connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gabar means like mighty or hero, like heroic. And so with this, it might, or also strong. And so that's the root of Gabriel, which means the Gavriel, which is
So you're
like,
saying that these two angels, Michael and Gabriel, are describing essentially the function of the smiter as Reshep, the form of divine retribution and punishment.
yeah. And I mean, you even have references to like, what is this? I think, oh, okay, yeah, I know where it is. Have you ever read anything from Habakkuk?
I have read it, but refresh my memory because I'm sure the audience hasn't. It's one of those weird, kooky little things that people tend to forget about in the Bible. But
Yeah,
I remember it was very important.
It's very Habakkuk-y.
Kooky, yeah.
All right, let's see. If only it will actually load. I swear, I really need to like refresh my computer at some point.
The weirder something is, usually the more important it will be.
Yeah, and the harder it'll be to find it. I guess actually, wait. Yeah, okay, here, perfect. So it's a pretty short.
Yeah, I know it's a short one. It's one of the Nevi'im, right?
Yeah, one of the ecstatic ones.
There was one that was about like the sacred marriage between Israel and God. Maybe we could talk about that later.
Yeah, that Shir Hashirim or Song of Songs.
And well, the Song of Songs, but also there was one of the Nevi'im that directly made the comparison between Israel and Yahweh as a holy marriage. I forget which one it was. Was it Nehemiah or Zechariah or?
I'm not sure, but okay. Let's see. Is it finally loading? Okay, here. Perfect. So two. So let's see. Where is it? Oh, it might be 3. Okay, yeah, it's 3. Oh wait, no. Here, yeah, it is 3. I just went too far. Okay. Let's see. Okay, here. Let's see. Wait. Okay, that's also interesting. So, for what has just reading this first, what has the carved image availed? That its maker has carved it for an image and a false oracle. That the one who makes an item has trusted in it, producing dumb idols. Again, it's missing the point. They're not trusting in the idols themselves. You who say, "Wake up to wood, awaken to inert stone." That almost seems like it's a reference to this idea of like an awakening ritual where you're imbuing the spirit into the vessel. But can that give an oracle why it is encased in gold and silver, but there is no breath inside it? But God, but Adonai in the Heichal, in his Heichal Kodsho, in his holy like temple, be silent before God all the earth. And then does it? Now wait, me find out. Oh, just before him. Okay, here's where it is. A prayer of the prophet Habakkuk in the mode of. So this is also interesting. Shigionoth. So Shigionot might also be connected. So this word Shigaon, which means like to be, let's see, wild, passionate song with rapid changes of rhythm, and it has to do with the fact that like Shigaon or like Shaga means to be like kind of out of control, for lack of a better term. But okay, so here, and it's interesting. So this renders it as eternal one rather than Adonai or Yahweh. But Adonai Shamati, Adonai heard. Wait, is this? Oh no, I'll only translate once we get to it. So, Eternal One, I have learned of your renown. I'm renowned, O Adonai, by your deeds. Renew them in these years. O make them known in these years. Though angry, may you remember compassion. Oh wait, here's where it is. So now notice this. So here it's referring to Adonai, Yud He Vav He. Here it changes to Eloah. Eloah meteman yavo. Eloah, and it's also interesting because Eloah is the proper singular form of Elohim. Whereas like Elim is the plural of El, but Eloah is the singular of Elohim. So, and for whatever reason, it also can render Eloah as a false god, but it can also be God, which I just think is kind of fascinating because I don't know, it's an interesting fact. But so Eloah is coming, Miteman Yavo is coming from Teman or from the south, either or. Vekadosh Mehar Paran. And the Holy One from the mountain of Paran. So basically saying that Eloah is coming from Teman and the Holy One is coming from Mount Paran. It's basically citing there's 2 different locations. And the question is it talking about the same entity coming from two different places, or is it talking about two different, entities, two different places meeting up at one? Sela, and that's just like, part of the song. Kisa Shamayim covered over, Kisa Shamayim Hodu, his glory covers over the Shamayim, over the heavens, which also was, a proper deity in the ancient context.
Yes.
V'tihilato, and his like praise or splendor, mala haaretz, fills the earth. Now this is where it gets interesting. V'noga kaor, and the shining or the brightness was like light. Tihia, that was karnaim, that was like rays, rays of light, that was like rays of light, that had like rays of light miyado, from its side, side for it, visham chevion uza, and there it was, there was concealed his might or his strength. Now this is where like the really relevant part. Lefanav, before him, Yelech, goes forth, daver or dever, pestilence.
Baal.
Yeah.
That's the place where Baal had his cow hookup.
Wait, what? Oh, wow, you're right. And it's also a proper place as well. But
yeah, it's just south of Hebron, actually.
What?
The Bear is just southeast of Hebron, at 15 miles.
Interesting. And so then this next part, Vayetze, and going out, Reshef leraglav, and going out before or to his feet, like before his feet was Reshef. And so then it changes to, is it, let's see, it might be further down. Okay, yeah, further down. Havni Hari, wait, Hara Adonai, the like wrath of Adonai, Im Benaharim, with the streams of Fecha, with the streams against your anger. Okay, wait, is it? No, I guess, sorry, I thought it was referenced here, but then here you have a reference to Shemesh Yareach, the sun and the moon, which later on rabbinic tradition does an effort to not refer to as either Shemesh or Yareach, but actually as Haman Levana, as the hot one and the white one, because of the fact that both names end up being associated with paganism. But they actually kind of touching on, where was it? I could have sworn.
Hot one and the white one. Where did my mind go with that?
Honestly, wait, where was? Sorry, I'm trying to. There was a question, and now I can't find it. It was, if I can't find it. Oh, here it was. So, as a practicing Yid, which, by the way, this is a word that it's okay if Jews say it, but it's like it's been used as a slur by non-Jews. So, just giving people a context of that, because like directly, like in Yiddish, Yid means Jew, but it's one of those things where it's like it's become very sensitive. But so generally, if you're not Jewish, don't use it. But anyway, so this was Deuteronomy 16:21. Let's see, Deuteronomy 16:21. 16:21. Okay, here it is. Okay, so this is actually a really interesting one. I didn't remember it by hand, but when I saw it, I'm like, oh, sweet, this is perfect. So this is actually at the beginning of Shoftim, so the book of, or not book of Judges, but the chapter of Judges. So Shoftim v'shotrim, so judges and guards, or like, so the word shoter is like in modern Hebrew used for like mishtara, so like police, so like not guards, but like officers. So judges and officers, titan lecha, you will give for yourself, or you shall appoint. Bechol she'arecha, at all your for all your gates. Oh, it's referring to maybe for all the gates of the tribes. Asher Adonai, that Adonai Elohecha, your God, noten lecha, that gave to you, lishivatecha, according to your tribes, vishaftu, and they will judge at Ham, the nation, mishpat tzedek. Now notice this. They will judge the nation, mishpat tzedek, with the judgment of tzedek. Isn't that interesting? It gets translated as due justice or is like just like righteous judgment, but this here it actually has it hyphenated mishpat tzedek, the mishpat of tzedek. Now the question,
Interesting.
yeah, now it's just wondering, okay, well, is tzedek a concept or is it? I mean, even the angel of the spirit of like kindness or like of mercy is called Tzadkiel, the tzedek of El, which is kind of interesting because the tzedek of El is tzedek.
Maybe they got bored during this part and they said the quiet part out loud in the translation.
That's what I'm thinking. And
yeah, well, you see, you get the laziness when it comes to these secondary chapters. That's why you find, the hidden treasure in these boring chapters or the weird ones, like Habakkuk, of course, Zabakuk, Gabaluk, Namasuk, Tabachuk. So that was a weird experiment I had to do with. Anyway, forget about it. It was something I was. How about we talk about the holy marriage, since you were talking about the holy marriage?
Yeah, just real quick. Yeah, I just want I wanted to just sorry. So I'll just read it. So you shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Now then it goes again. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice or tzedek, tzedek you shall pursue. Like this idea of pursue after it. Now it later on, like the idea of rodef ends up being this idea of like a pursuer, like you're pursuing after someone to either kill them or like to do harm. But literally it just means to pursue. So there's even there's some temples or shuls or synagogues that are called rodef shalom, which means pursuer of peace. And it's the idea of that, like, rather than pursue for violence, like to pursue for peace. But but notice this, which is kind of interesting because you have two narratives going on here. So tzedek, you shall pursue, lema'an, so that tichiyeh, you can live, vayirashta, and inherit, et ha'aretz, the land, asher Adonai, that Adonai, which again, it gets confusing because it's Adonai Elohecha, Adonai your God, but which we'll just say, which God, noten lecha, gave to you. But notice this, justice you shall pursue, that you may not thrive, but literally live and inherit. But what's interesting is this is within the same narrative of the displacement of the Canaanites, despite the fact that the Israelites were Canaanites, and that most of
didn't the narrative of Deuteronomy come about when the king of Judah was kind of wanting to get rid of all these other cults, and he found we found this Torah scroll we've never seen before in some vault of the temple, and that's when they found Deuteronomy, and it had all the stuff about killing Canaanites and taking down their temples and whatnot.
Yeah, and I have a big feeling that it has to do with this idea. We'll say that we killed the Canaanites so that we forget that we were Canaanites.
Yes. So every religion kind of defines itself, not what it is, but what it's not. Kind of like how Canadians define themselves as being not Americans. And as much as I would like to not be American, that's a superficial thing to describe yourself as Canadian. Sorry, Canadians, you're just Americans. You're just slightly less obnoxious Americans.
Also, real quick, Mystical Order of Israel. Yeah, I figured you're Jewish. I was just giving that context for anyone else who didn't know the history or context of that word. But so here, now we're getting to the passage. So lo tita. Also, it's really, I'm going to be honest, it's weird to me that it chooses that this translation is occupy, because the word here, yarash, is, well, so it can be to seize, dispossess, take possession of, but it can also be to inherit, which is like, it kind of goes with this whole idea of like, what even does that mean in this context? Because people within the narrative, like within the internal narrative, there's a lot of displacement going on, but within the reality of what most likely happened, it didn't. And that's the silver lining that I see, that not all, but a good amount of the horrors that are attributed in the Bible didn't happen. They're just being used for theological reasons to
Yeah, I know. For the most part, the conquest narrative probably never happened, or happened to a much different and smaller extent. There was something like that. Like, that's what I was studying in the Amarna letters. There was this big conflagration of violence, and may well have been sectarian around the region of the Jezreel Valley, in the region of Shechem and Hazor, in the region of Galilee, that was where the conquest narrative, all locations in the conquest narrative tend to be in that region. And where else was going on there in the 1300s BCE? That's when Mutbal was getting revenge on all the people who crossed his daddy, Labayu.
Interesting. His name was Mutbal. Isn't that like a combination of Mut and Baal?
Or usually they translate it Mut as man of Baal, but I kind of thought, oh, Mut of Baal, that sounds much more metal to me.
Yeah, the death of Baal. But
yeah, I mean, like, that's a very easy pun to point out, because Mut means man, but it also means death.
Oh, okay. This is really interesting because one of the there's like different levels of humanity, and I think one of the like lower ones is this idea of metim, and this idea of humans that die as opposed to like humans that like are able to transcend death or something, or like whether through spiritually or like this idea of deification. But I did want to address this because this is huge. I never realized this until now. So lo tita lecha asherah. But notice this. So it says you shall not set up a sacred post. That's not what it actually says. Lo tita lecha. Do not plant for yourself an Asherah. Kol etz etzel, any tree that is beside Mizbeach Adonai, the altar of Adonai, Elohecha, your God. Asher ta'aseh lecha, that you make for yourself. So notice this, twice it's implying, so you shall not make it. So the way that rabbis understand is it's that you shall not make it, and you shall not, you shall not plant it and you shall not make it. But literally what it actually says is you shall not plant it for yourself by the altar of the Lord, and you shall not make it for yourself. Or alternatively, it's saying you shall not plant the Asherah next to the altar of the Lord, or any kind of pole that you make beside it. The point is, it's not saying you can't make it. It's not saying that you can't plant them. It's saying that it can't be beside the altar of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge because it changes the meaning. And then here's where it gets huge, and it shows you that Deuteronomy, that this is like it's revisionist, because the lo takim lecha, and you are not to establish or set up for or you are not to erect for yourself a matzeva asher saneh. You are not to erect a matzeva or like a mastaba, like a memorial or a standing stone, asher saneh, that is hated by Adonai Elohecha, your God. Now you know why this is just simply we can throw this out, because Jacob did this and God was happy with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it is literally bizarre that this idea could have ever happened, because it literally with Bethel, where is this? Is it Helam? Oh wait, when the sun rose. Wait, okay, Jacob. It might be further than this. He rose that night. Is it? I'm trying to think. It was the. Oh right, I could just search for Matzeva. But I mean, like, what do you make of that? Because that, like, it's outright saying very clearly that the issue is, like, it's almost like putting it on the same level. It's not the existence or the worship.
So I think I got caught not paying him as much attention as I should. Normally I say something that's really, really brilliant in this part, but right now I'm not saying something really, really brilliant.
No worries.
Okay, so about the Asherah pole. Well, I guess this is a good time as any to bring up, how in the ancient Near East everything is connected to nature and agricultural cycles. And trees are also a symbol of endurance. That they would plant these trees was almost like, that there's some really, really freaking old trees in the world that are hundreds of years old. I'm wondering if this was something that specifically got called out in Deuteronomy, because that was the last really strong surviving relic of this connection to these earlier cult practices, was through the trees, because they could go to the trees and they could see how their ancestors worshipped. It was a tradition that they forgot what it meant. but the tree was a message from an earlier time. Because trees live longer, and actually trees can sometimes survive longer than the perishable materials scrolls are made out of. I'm wondering if someone carved like a heart saying Yahweh plus Asherah with a heart on their Asherah tree. That's,
Okay.
it's reductio ad absurdum for that, but I could see that, right? Something like that, almost.
So that's kind of interesting because not only does Jacob set up these standing stones, he also, let's see, where is it here? Here. Of course, it's like it doesn't pull up right. I have to. It's ridiculous. I wish that. Okay, Acacia Jacob. Let's see. All right. And acacia wood. Some of our ancient sages said that the patriarch Jacob planted acacia trees in Egypt, and Israel, upon the command of Moses, brought them out. And every man with whom was found acacia wood brought it as proof of this. They possessed acacia as they possessed the blue and the purple, which is the techel, or the dye, the Phoenician
dye. Royal symbol, because every Jew is a king.
And the purple, which was much more connected to the Phoenician tradition, but even gets hugely emphasized in the Israelite tradition. Now, if we so interpret it, then we must ask, why did the Israelites take acacia wood out of Egypt? What need did they have for acacia wood? Also see Rashi 40, that Israel had acacia wood in their possession, that the acacia wood was used by each individual brought it out of Egypt for that person's own use. Ibn Ezra assumes that the Israelites had no need for acacia wood, but it actually talks about... Somewhere there's a mention of, I can't find it right now, but, here, found it, perfect. And then when I look up it, okay, here, there were acacia trees in Migdal Savaya. They came and asked Rabbi Hananiah, the colleague of the rabbis, may one use them for work? Know that it is permitted, but he has the usage to treat it as forbidden. If he asks, they will not permit him, since by a Galilean tradition, the tabernacle was built in the desert from perfect logs of acacia wood, cut for this purpose by Jacob and his sons when they traveled to Egypt. But what's interesting is there were leftover acacias that were planted in, of all places, Magdala.
Mm-hmm. And Magdala was obviously a very important place in the Amarna period. They make reference to Migdal of Egypt, that it was connected to Egypt somehow, but it's kind of ambiguous as to what that meant. I was wondering if you might want to add some context to that.
So, the thing that's definitely interesting with the name is Magdala is from the root, Migdal, which is tower. But
Jericho.
It also could have some connections to this idea of like a towering tree as well, but that's just kind of speculation. But let's see where. Okay. Wait, is it here? Okay, here I found it. Let's see. Okay, perfect. And everyone with whom acacia wood was found is not written here, but rather with whom it was found. From the outset, Rabbi Levi Bar Chia said they chopped them down in Magdala of the dyers, which it also connects Magdala with dyeing, which is kind of interesting due to the proximity to Phoenicia. This was the name of a place in the land of Israel, and took them with them down to Egypt. They had no knots and no cracks. They were acacia trees in Magdala, and the custom was to prohibit using them due to the sanctity of the ark. They came and asked Rav Hananiah, a colleague of the rabbis, and he said to them, do not deviate from the custom of your ancestors. So tying to this idea of connection to the ancestors, it says, even in the times of the sages of the Midrash, acacia trees grew in Magdala, but due to the tradition that the wood eventually used for the ark and the rest of the tabernacle had been cut from there, the people of Magdala would not make use of the acacia trees. This is ritual, reverence for a tree.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of that song, I love and kiss this tree, no, not sexually. Unrelated, I have got splinters on my D. That's from Handel, right?
I've never heard that, but it reminds me in Elder Scrolls how there's, I think, the founder of the second dynasty, the second imperial dynasty, ends up mating with a literal hole in the hill, like a literal hole in the earth of a hill. And then he ends up 9 months later popping out a baby boy.
It happens, like if Baal can have sex with a cow, then anyone can have sex with anything. The doors are open.
But yeah, so we'll get into what you were talking about. I just wanted to bring this up because, we talked about trees. So then you have, what is it? So Jacob says, shaken, he said, how awesome is this place? There is none other than the abode of God, and that is the gateway to heaven. Now notice this. Im Beit Elohim. This is the house of Elohim, but literally the house of Elohim, the gods. Vizeh Sha'ar HaShamayim, and this is the gate of Shamayim. It says the gateway to heaven, but it could also be the gate of Shamayim.
Yeah, the god Shamuma.
Yeah, and so then early in the morning, Vayishkem. Now it's also interesting because Shechem, and he woke up or he rose, but it's also connected to the root of Shechem. And Jacob, Jacob woke up, Baboker in the morning, Vayikach et ha'even, and he took the stone, Asher Sham, that was there, Asher Sam, that he had placed, Mirashatav, for his head, Vayasem, and he placed it, Matseva, as a Matseva, Vayitzok, and he poured out Shemen, oil, al Rosha, upon its head. Now, what else is interesting is Rosha, if you rearrange the letters, it has the 4 letters that are in Asherah. Rosha, Asherah, has the same 4 letters. And he named that site Bethel, but previously the name of the city had been Luz. Now, what else is interesting is that Luz means almond, and almond is, it's also connected to the shape of the menorah, but that's a story for another time. So, it's clearly saying he set up a matzeva, and then if we go back to where we were before, it says you're not to set up a matzeva, because Adonai detests it. That literally makes no sense, because you have Deuteronomy, which is being used to contradict. You're not to for God Adonai that you may make, or erect a stone pillar for such your God Adonai detests. It literally is contradictory.
Well, of course it's contradictory. It's written hundreds of years apart.
Yeah, that's literally the reason why. But some people, if they view it as everything being connected, they have to, end up homogenizing it, and inevitably you're going to get all these issues.
That many people, probably 30% of Americans, believe that the Bible, its original language, was English, and the original version was the King James Version altogether. My uncle literally believes that. Americans, it's the center of education and learning in the modern world, right?
Oh my God. I'll be right back. I have to use the restroom, but feel free.
I'll entertain the audience while you're away. Thank you, Olivia. How do I share comments?
Let me see if there's let's see.
I think you can do it, but I don't think I can do that.
Let's see. Actually, wait, I think I might know how. Here, let's see if I can do this.
You shouldn't feel ashamed to be an American. Because you shouldn't feel ashamed for something you can't choose. Unfortunately, I was born an American, but you can move. You can live anywhere else in the world, or not really, because everywhere is just an American colony. I guess you can go to North Korea and be free from America.
Yeah, it's there's no escaping Rome.
Yes. We're all living in America. America. No, you're not ashamed. It's an intentional thing to keep people in the dark about that. Yeah, Mexico's nice. I used to live right across the border from Mexico. It took an hour to go down there, get medical work done without having to sell our kidney for it. America's so expensive. Worst healthcare. Well, not the worst, but it costs an arm and a leg. You'll probably lose an arm and a leg because of diabetes. Imagine the old man, he wheeled up in his wheelchair. You know how I lost this leg? Wasn't in Nam. Diabetes. And keep leaving me comments. I'm gonna riff off of them for a while. Whoever's on the stream, just leave me rant. Oh, my head was it back? Did you just do a genie apparition sort of deal? I was
Wait,
just
what?
telling them about the deep biblical meaning of diabetes.
What is it?
You know, it was the second archdemon under Beelzebub, diabetes, the infernal lord of glucose.
Deus Pitus.
I'm just being so silly. Yeah. Yeah, but if you want to get people, triggered, just start saying, "Oh, North Korea isn't as bad as people say. It's just a normal place." It has its flaws, but it's like ancient Egypt. You want to go back to ancient Egypt? Just live in North Korea. Beautiful country, lots of trees. It would be nice to see trees. I've never seen a tree. What's a tree look like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like when you start caressing it tenderly? I'm from Arizona, so I wouldn't know.
Oh, come on. There's plenty of trees. I feel like I need to clarify this because some people might take this the wrong way, but I have a figurative love affair with acacia trees in Arizona. Whenever I see an acacia tree, I smell it. It's like, I love it.
I like cedar trees, but it's a little bit on the nose for me.
I mean, it's not any more on the nose than acacia. They were both used ritually.
That's true.
But yeah, cedar does smell amazing, especially if you cook on it.
I think J.K. Rowling may be onto something because I took her "What's My Wand" type quiz, and guess what wand I got?
What?
Cedar.
Oh, nice.
On the Pottermore universe. I think she has some sorcery. Oh God, Delaware.
Yeah, it's honestly so bizarre. There was a time where everyone's like, J.K. Rowling, she's going to get your kids into witchcraft, and all of a sudden now the Christians love her.
I guess she used her witchcraft. Of course, I have ties to Morocco, so I know a few things about witchcraft.
The way you said it, I have ties to Morocco. No, Morocco's a beautiful place. I wish I could go sometime. Travel's become very difficult for me since COVID. But real quick, just to catch up on some of the comments. So idols were usually easily manipulated to exploit worshippers. They definitely can be, but to say that they're inherently, exploitative, I think is the place where a lot of people end up making the problem. But this is
the idol thing.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we're not lazy. We just don't have any work. That's why we're idle. Oh, you meant the other type of idol. Okay, yeah. So I know what you meant. So the idols, about the idols, there's a diversity of opinions. I'm sure some people were ignorant enough to believe that the idols were literally the gods. I wouldn't be surprised by that. Just the same as people believe that the original language of the Bible was English in the King James Version. But they usually fell into a certain variety of categories for idol worship. Either it was symbolic of a deity, it was inhabited by a deity, which is plausible. What kind of god do you have that can't even inhabit a freaking idol? You're lazy god. So weak, he can't even inhabit an idol. And the third one is they could just be like a ritual object. And there were, and to a certain extent, all three of these categories, involved in Israelite worship and also in all the other Abrahamic religions as well. The cross is a symbol of the sacrifice of Jesus. There were idols that were like that. There's sort of they believed that the Ark of the Covenant contained the spirit of Yahweh. So that's another of that type. And the third of that type, simply just a ritual object. Oh, there's lots of ritual objects in the temple and in all sorts of forms of worship. I think the interesting thing is Islam is the closest thing to a really monotheistic religion. That's why I kind of don't diss them, because they're not really hypocrites about it. They kind of are serious about the monotheism thing. Maybe they take it too far.
It's one of those things that's they're the true monotheists, but then they also end up, the more extreme forms end up being like, okay, so we're, we only believe in one God, and so do you have to. But again, that's not, most Muslims aren't like that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, the things that people point to as being a symbol of the pagan heritage, pagan Arabian heritage in Islam. Muslim groups were actually fully aware of that. And there were extreme Muslim groups that, like, for example, the Al-Karmati, the Karmatians were in Bahrain, and they besieged Mecca and tried to destroy the Kaaba and smashed the black stone to a million pieces. So the one we have today was just when they picked the pieces back together after Muslims themselves destroyed it.
Wow.
But they were Shia, so they're weirdos. Not just Shia, but Ismaili Shia, not even 12er.
So also one thing that I did want to share in context of what was it? It was further up here. Of course, I can't find it now. The thing about hit list. So one thing that addressing. Oh, I didn't realize. Wait, what happened to my camera? Shoot. This is weird. I have no clip. Hold on. Let me try to figure this out. Camera. This is so bizarre. Let's see. Settings. Camera. Let's see. Okay. That's weird. Wait. Oh no, here. Is it going to work?
I guess we need to have a musical break. Musical break.
Oh no, I got it. But yeah, so addressing the whole idea of like Asherah as somehow being against Jewish tradition. When I found this blew my mind. So I'll translate. Given Aramaic, not my strong suit, but I'll do my best. So tachazi, I think that means like it's said. It's but kol elu ha'ovdim, all those who serve or who worship, because the word avodah can also be worship, like of a god.
Mm-hmm.
All those who worship, or no, ovdim. So in this case, it is work for. All those who work for lachma, for bread, nikraim, bechol makom. They're called in all places. Ovdei b'habaal. So the people who work for bread, they're called the servants of Baal, and that's connected to this idea of Baal connected to the grain, and then it has v'chol ha'ovdim lilavanim, livonim. So and all those who work for livona, for frankincense, nikraim oved Asherah. They're called the servants of Asherah. Ve'al ken, and therefore katuv leBaal ve'le Asherah, and therefore it is written to Asherah, to Baal and to Asherah. Asher Baal hu chama. Asher is Baal. He is the son. Shehu hazachar, and he is the masculine. The Asherah he, and she is Asherah. Or Asherah, she is Levana, the moon. Shehi hanukva, and she is the feminine. Nikrat Asherah al Shem Ba'ala, and Asherah is and she is called Asherah upon the name of her husband, Shenikra, who is called Asher. Now, this also connects to the idea of Ashur. Imkan, if this is the case, Shehinikrat al Shem Ba'ala Asher, that if it is the case that she is called by the name of her spouse, her husband Asher, Lama Nital Hanukva, Mehanukva. Why Natal? Why was it removed? Mehanukva, from the feminine, Shem, from the name of the feminine, from this feminine name. Kilo matzanu, because we did not find Shehanukva, that the feminine Dekucha, the divine feminine, Tehiyah was Nikrat Asher. Because we did not find that the name of the divine feminine was called Asherah, and it is said Eile, or Eile Shehi, I think why are these that she is called Asherah al Shem Hakatuv, is upon the name that is written Be'oshri, in happiness, Ki Ishroni, because I am blessed, but not amongst women. So this is connecting to something that Leah says, but it's saying that's why she's called, she's not called Asherah because of her spouse Asher, but because of this, this line. Dehainu all that we were upon Shem, upon the name she acharim, the name, the last name, me ashrim. I'm getting rusty on this, but basically, velo ashru, and she's not blessed. She is not blessed. She'ar ha'um. I'm just going to find a proper translation, but basically, what it's saying is, and I'd like to say I'm getting better at getting much better at Aramaic, but it's not perfect. So here's what it says. It says in Deuteronomy, you shall not plant for yourselves an Asherah or any kind of tree beside the altar of the Lord, thy God, which Asherah you shall make for yourselves. Are we to suppose that anywhere else is permitted to plant an Asherah? Of course not. The truth is that the Hey, the letter of God's name that represents the feminine divine, is called Asherah, after the name of its spouse Asher, and that the meaning of the verse is, therefore, you shall not plant another Asherah by the side of the altar, which is established upon this Asherah. Observe that throughout the scriptures, the worshippers of the sun are called servants of Baal, and the worshippers of the moon servants of Asherah. Hence the combination of Baal and Asherah. If this is so, that Asherah is the name of the feminine aspect of God, why is it not used as a sacred name? The reason is that this name brings to mind the words of Leah, happy am I, for the daughters will call me happy Ishroni. But this one is not called happy by other nations. Another nation is set up in its place. It is written, all that honored her despise her, from Lamentations 1:8. But the real altar is one that is made of earth, as it is written, an altar of earth you shall make for me. That is why it says in Genesis, dust from the earth. So basically here it's saying that Asherah, that within the altar of Yud He Vav He, that the last He is Asherah, and so to plant another Asherah is basically to create this type of there's two Asherahs, but it's but also kind of connecting Asherah with Adonai, almost that the names are interwoven. So it's this is something that's this is Zohar, this is Jewish mysticism, but it's something that people were clearly pulling on. And just one last thing before we get into the Heroes Gamos thing. Have you ever read Ezekiel 19? Because when I saw this, I'm like, okay, this is clearly referencing Asherah without it's not even hidden.
Ezekiel what?
Ezekiel 19.
Ezekiel 19.
So this blew me away when I saw it. So
that is that's it. Okay, well, that's it. There you go.
Yeah.
Or Anat. To be honest, all these goddesses, some of these goddesses had similar symbology, but yeah, I can easily see that.
Yeah. So the reason why I specify Asherah though is so you have you're to endure your tone over the princes of Israel. But notice this, it says El Nisiye Israel, over the princes of Israel, not the prince of Israel. But so basically it could either be it's referring to someone who's in the kingdom of Israel who's a prince, or it could be referring to the princes of Israel, if Israel being the king is in essence his children. But the question is, because it says, what Linus was your mother? There was no one mother of the princes of Israel, which is why I'm suggesting this is actually a reference to the Gvira as Asherah, or basically this divine mother figure.
Well, what if the princes of Israel may refer to the sons of El?
Interesting.
Because all the sons of El are referred to as princes. Prince Mot, Prince Yam. And Asherah is the mother of the princes of El,
Yeah, I definitely think, because you have this idea of the 70 souls that came out, or that went into Egypt, and then this idea, 70 sons of Israel, and then the 70 sons of El. There's definitely a parallel there. But in this case, it does seem like it's referring to the children almost as kingdoms, or it's being personified. But yeah, just again, so what a lioness was your mother. Among the lioness, crouching amongst the great beasts, she reared her cubs. She raised up one of her cubs. He became a great beast, learned to hunt prey, devoured people. Nations heeded a call against him. He was caught in their snare. They dragged him off with hooks to the land of Egypt. Seems pretty indicative of the idea of the exile in Egypt, potentially this idea of Joseph being dragged off in chains. When she saw herself frustrated, her hope defeated, she took another of her cubs and set him up as a great beast. He stalked amongst the lions. He was a great beast. He learned to hunt prey. He devoured people. It's one of the translations is rape their widows, but vayeda almanotav. This word directly just says vayeda, and he knew their almanotav. He knew they're either widows or potentially this idea of a widowed city. the Araham and their cities. It's very like he knew their widows and their cities. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but let's see. Emendation yields ravaged their castles, laid waste their cities, the land and all in it were appalled at the sound of its roaring. Nations from the countries round about arrayed against themselves against him. They spread their net over him. He was caught in their snare. With hooks, he was put in a cage. They carried him off to the king of Babylon and confined him in a fortress that never again would his roar be heard on the hills of Israel. So now here's where it gets back into it. Imecha, your mother, kagefen, like the vine, or your mother is like a vine, or like a vine. Bidamecha, either in your blood or in your likeness. Almayim shetula, along the waters she was planted. Priya ve'anefa, she was fruitful and had many branches. Haita mimayim rabim, and she was from the great waters. Vayihula, and for her there was matot oz, staffs or like rods of strength. El shivtei mishlim, for the rule for guiding or for teaching the tribes. Vatigva, and they towered komato, like high, or no, they were high, towering over Albain Ovotim amongst, I'm not sure, Vayreb. They were seen by the heights. It was conspicuous by its height, by the abundance of its spouse. But okay, now here's where it gets kind of connected to even this idea of the burning bush. But plucked up in a fury, she was hurled to the ground. The east wind withered her branches. They broke apart and dried her up, and her mighty rod was consumed by fire. Now she is planted in the desert, in ground that is arid and parched. Fire has issued from her twig-laden branch and consumed her boughs. She is left without a mighty rod, a scepter to rule with. This is a dirge, and it has become a familiar dirge. So with this, you have the symbolism of the tree, the water, and the lioness.
And the sex.
Oh, wait, which part's the sex?
So, left without a mighty rod.
Oh.
And the dryness is the exact sort of symbolism that was used in the descent of Ishtar. When Ishtar goes into the underworld, the lack of sex that people were having was symbolized by the dryness of the land. Fertility, agricultural fertility, was connected with the getting it on fertility.
Interesting. And that probably has something, because have you ever heard there's a tradition that like at Sinai with the giving of the Torah, that like God caused the mountain to bloom with greenery, and then he sent a fire down from heaven to consume the greenery, and it caused the smoke to go up to the heavens. And then this is also potentially connected with the whole like the building of the golden calf, that maybe like they were under the influence or something, and because of that, whether it's seen as a lack of judgment or because this was the norm back then, they ended up building this golden calf, and it was part of this the way that gets translated, and I think that's interesting because it gets translated this way by a lot of like traditional people, is that they actually understand it as being some sort of like feast and orgy that they had around the golden calf.
Wouldn't be surprised. I was thinking interesting, like I wonder if there was a concentrated conspiracy to render inappropriate or immoral or look down upon in a certain way all the sex that was previously front and center in religion. Because obviously sex is ridiculously important for everyone's lives, like eating food, drinking water, getting ass,
It's interesting because a few weeks ago I read this commentary about the laver, like the washing basin for the feet of the priest or whatever. So it was made of bronze, but the way they got the bronze, and this is like very much specified within tradition, is that the brass from or the bronze that they got for the laver, they got it by melting down women's mirrors, like beautification mirrors. And the idea is that Moses was apparently very uncomfortable over the idea of that which was used to incite the sons of Israel to fornication is also what's going to be used for the cleansing of the feet of the priests. And so the reason why, which obviously it's probably back to a different interpretation, but the reason that's given is that it's because this was like, if it wasn't for these mirrors that allowed the women to beautify themselves, there wouldn't have been children born, and there wouldn't have been enough people for the giving of the Torah at Sinai. And so basically it's because of these mirrors that the Torah was able to be given. I mean, it's a rationalization, but I think it's pretty interesting.
There's definitely been a trend towards demonization of sex throughout human history.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get a few questions and we could go into that.
Questions.
So Goat T said most Muslims know it's just a rock, even though some of the stupid Muslims might think it has magical powers. I mean, similar to anything, like you have these more superstitious, like folk religion element. And again, I don't think it's necessarily stupid. It's more so they're coming from a different place. Like, there are stupid people, but like I think that not everyone who buys into certain beliefs is stupid. It's just that's how they were raised.
It's certainly no crazier than believing just the normal religious stuff when you believe the weird stuff.
Yeah. And then Graham says, for the official record, I'm anti-genocide, regardless of the target, be they Palestinian, Israeli, Cambodian, Rwandan, Yazidi, Darfur, etc. Yeah, I think that's something that we should all be, because then, I don't know, it's like, I feel like a lot of people kind of forget that it's like, if the shoe are on the other foot, their reaction might be a lot different. But at the end of the day, it's like, you can't help how you're born, who you're born to. So it's like, I don't know.
There's only two things I can't stand: intolerance and the Swiss.
Wait, does that mean you can't stand yourself?
I'm not Swiss.
No, but you said you can't stand intolerance. If you can't,
I'm a self-hating racist.
Anyway,
okay.
So Goat T said Cohen bashing America is making me like Canaanite idol worshippers. Let's see. Graham said maybe Red Heifer corresponds with Bloody Hathor. Wait, is that like a bloody?
Hathor thing if you want.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, but
expound on it.
Yeah, just real quick. Is that like a Egyptian Bloody Mary?
I don't know much about the Bloody Heifer part, but I know that Hathor was actually one of the main deities that was worshipped by the Canaanite slaves at the Egyptian copper mines in Timnah in the Sinai, that they established the worship of this deity. So I'm wondering if that has some connection. Obviously, slaves, cows. I mean, like, if you're just the workmen in this desert site, what else are you going to do? What else are you going to stick it in? Each other?
Yeah. I mean, in some cases, maybe. I mean, after all, why do they have to say, don't do this? Though, the whole idea of like the prohibition against it is that like you shall not lie with a man as you lie with a woman. That's actually a mistranslation. It's you shall not lie with a male as you shall lie with a woman, which, given the time it comes into existence, it might actually be an anti-Hellenistic thing where they're going against pederasty, which I personally don't have an issue with that. The issue that I have is that they don't go far enough. They say you shall not lie with a male or a female as you lie with a woman. But
well, they certainly have had pederasty as a big part of Mediterranean culture long after paganism ended. As anyone who comments on the Catholic Church will know. But also in traditional Amazigh culture in Siwa, they had a form of pederastic marriage between younger men and older men. I mentioned that in one of my other videos.
Interesting. What was it? But yeah, speaking of Hathor, though, the site that you're referring to, the temple, this is, I think, the only Hathor temple that they found outside of the land of Egypt. But Serabit al-Qadim, is that it?
Yeah. Timnah is a very interesting site because that's one of the earliest examples of, Egyptian imperialism in Canaan was the economic exploitation of copper resources and other copper oxides like malachite and turquoise.
So the thing that I kind of realized, on one hand, you have this idea that Hathor, like, there's a connection between Sekhmet and Hathor, right?
Presumably, yeah, that they have a lot of similarities. In ancient Egypt, people kind of get the sense that Egypt was just, they just one religion, the Egyptian religion. But each different part of Egypt had their own pantheon and their own beliefs. And the pharaoh had to kind of like accommodate all of them.
basically, one of the things that I've suspected is that there is this myth where basically Sekhmet is I might be getting confused. It might be Hathor in both cases, but basically Sekhmet, she's like sent by Ra to destroy humanity or something because they've caused an issue. It's kind of like this is basically the Egyptian flood, or connected to it. But what they end up doing is that Ra ends up seeing that she's not really stopping, or I think he repents of his choice and he's like, hey, can you stop it? But it's like he's already issued the order, which is emblematic of this idea of once you've issued an order, you can't undo it. And so he ends up having to they spike the Nile with mandrake beer, which is dyed red, to convince her that it's blood. And so they trick her into lapping up the Nile, and she falls asleep in mandrake beer. And when she wakes up, she's calmed of her anger, and from what I understand, she becomes Hathor. Now, what's interesting is before the giving of the Torah, this like what's seen as like this like almost like motherly, because there's this tradition of having milk during Shavuot because there's a reason that's explained why it's but like also it connects with this like maternal imagery, but with this idea that basically you have this merciful feminine figure, but before that you have this vicious figure. And what's interesting is that the way that Jewish tradition understands like the plagues as being meted out on Egypt, the 10 plagues, was that they were essentially like done by the Shekhinah, which is the feminine presence of God, which is also how God, or the masculine part of God, is understood to interact with the world, because it can't do it like directly because the masculine is transcendent while the feminine is immanent. And so basically the Shekhinah, which I also think maybe there's a connection between Sakan or Shachan and Sacham, like Sekhmet. It's definitely a stretch, but what I found interesting is you have this idea that she's destroying the people of Egypt. She's just killing like ruthlessly, and you have this idea with the death of the firstborn and all these other plagues. But what gets really interesting is that at the giving of the Torah, the Shekhinah becomes much more of this merciful and maternal figure. And what's interesting is Hator, you mix it around a bit, Hator becomes Torah. But
it's interesting because there is this duality of female goddesses in the Canaanite world as well. El is described as having two consorts, Afirat and Rahmai, and Baal is described sometimes as having two consorts, Anat and Ashtart. And Ashtart is called the word of Baal. So she is the conciliatory, the peacemaker, like Hathor. And Anat is, well, you know how Anat is. She's like, I will make your gray hairs of your beard drip like blood.
I don't know how well you can see this, but this is my attempt at Rahmai.
Nice. Underrated deity, in that we don't know really anything about her. Yeah. But Anat and Athirat and Ashtart, these are the dualities of Baal, of his peaceful side, but also his warlike side, his wisdom, but also his action. Because when we're doing all this empty talk, we could be, we could have, we could be doing something more direct, but you need also the wisdom. You need the wisdom and the action. Anat represents the action. Ashtart represents the wisdom.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because Anat, one of the things that, one of her motifs within the Baal cycle is that she's the one who goes to ask, right? She's the one who beseeches the El and Asherah in order to build the temple for Baal. And what's interesting is, on top of affliction, Anat can also mean to beseech or to ask.
Mm-hmm. She's always the person who takes action, whether that is, begging, threatening, manipulating, fixing, or just slaughtering,
Yeah.
We're going to have to find a stopping point at some point. So let's try to move this towards our hero Scamos, because this is getting to be a very long stream. I can't imagine anyone would want to watch this. Wait, am I the only person in here? Wait, am I the only one in here? Why am I?
Sorry about that.
So let's move this towards a neat little conclusion.
Definitely, yes. Sorry, I got lost in the discussion, but
I'm about 3 hours ahead of you since I'm on the East Coast.
All right, so let's see where. Here, let me just find one.
East Coast.
Yeah. So here, real quick, just go through it. So you throw away a ball and it comes bouncing back. Who's actually surprised by this?
No, that's a good one. I love that.
Yeah. So Graham also asks, Cohen Kolatz, how much of Ugaritic religion is imported from the Hittites or other non-Semitic peoples?
A lot of it is from the Hurrians. So the Hurrians are sometimes conflated with the Hittites and with the kingdom of Mitanni, but they are a substrate of just this wide region of Eastern Anatolia, Northern Mesopotamia, the Southern Caucasus, up to the Zagros Mountains of Iran. They were immensely significant in the development of world history, culture, morality, and mythology, and no one freaking knows about the Hurrians. But they were very influential on Ugarit and on the Hittites, and through the Hittites, the Greeks, through the Canaanites, the Israelites, and the Egyptians, into through the Mesopotamians into Persians. The Hurrians are a big freaking deal, and no one knows about them because they don't have a PR team. No one's a cheerleader for the Hurrians.
Do you think there's any connection between Haran and the Hurrians?
Well, one of their cities was called Haran. Haran was a Hurrian city, along with Urkesh, Karkemish, Urshu, all these sort of cities, Kanesh. A lot of things that are Hurrian are just sort of lumped in with Hittites, or lumped in with Ugaritic studies, or lumped in with Mesopotamian studies. As far as I know, there is almost no real deep study of the Hurrians in their own right, apart from their interactions with other cultures and other peoples.
Interesting. That is definitely something that's like, real quick, just because this was he was saying it was. Sorry, I'm just trying to find this real quick. It was 21 of. Oh, it was. Oh wait, no. Here, Ray. I think Ray did that. Yeah. Sorry. I'm just trying to see if we. Okay, so let's see.
Oh no, more Bible.
No. We're done.
I'm getting flashbacks of the Seder. They're reading. I know, die, I know, die, I know, die, I know.
One of the understandings of the name Shaddai is actually that Shed, that is, die, enough. So, like, one of the understandings is El Shaddai is the God that is enough, or essentially the substantive God. Like, that all is because, I don't know, it's an interesting interpretation. But so Munchies asks, what do you practice, Kohan?
I practice a form of martial arts called Heiventaschens. It's a Korean sword art. Japanese people like to say that it was ripped off of their. No, I'm just joking. I practice the ancient Canaanite religion. With Baal. Baal is my main. I sometimes alt Anat and Ashtart. I know I'm not using necessarily the most academic language, but I'm trying to be hip and cool to the kids, bro.
Yeah, like with me, it's kind of like I primarily view it as like El and Asherah, and I mean, not necessarily one before the other, but like co-substantial. And then it's like the others I see as being essentially equivalent to the angels of Judaism. And so it's like I find myself in a weird like middle ground between the two, but I also in some ways like I kind of like the idea of reconstructing the first temple tradition, which would have been something in between, well, probably more close to Canaanite tradition, but in between that and like maybe Hellenistic Judaism. But let's see, Munchie says y'all are very knowledgeable. Keep these videos going. I mean, I'm definitely down for this in the future.
Yeah, we can do it. Make it a Sunday thing. Sunday fun day.
Yeah, Sunday. Yeah. Hail like the sun.
Oh yeah, buy my book. Buy my book.
So,
I can show you the hard copy of my first book, but I've moved to a new edition now, which is orange. 7 times and 7 times I bow. Now the new version is just 7 times I bow, because why say it twice? It's it's the prostration formula. It's just like, oh, we're praying 7 times, 14.
Yeah, it's like
on Sundays.
Yeah, it's like mochu mat. You will die. You will die, but it gets interpreted as you will certainly die. So it's like you will certainly bow down 7 times or something.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that for Pharaoh. And this book is not really super about like this Jewish religious thing. It's really more about getting people the feeling. It's a historical fiction, but hard historical fiction, making people feel like they're actually living in that time in the context of the culture, not from an outsider's perspective, but just it throws you in this world and you figure it out, kind of.
Nice, yeah. All right, let's see. All right, Taj said, "Oh, nice. I recently started learning the Hebrew alphabet, and it's cool to see the words spelled out with a nikud. Something you should also definitely try to learn is the Paleo Hebrew, because that's what also connects to Phoenician and to Latin, and like basically, most of the languages, or not languages, but most of the script that we use now."
And Tamil.
What?
What did you say? What did you say?
Oh, that the Paleo Hebrew script connects to more things than the Aramaic derived script.
And Camel.
The what?
What? What are you talking about? I'm just trolling you.
Oh, okay.
I'm referencing those weird camel people. Oh, their oldest language, Tamil.
Oh, wait, you mean like the species camel?
No. Tamil, like
Tamil. Oh, okay, I got that. Sorry, I thought you were saying camel. Okay.
Okay, so let's get on with the hero scamos.
Yeah.
We have an iftar waiting.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. All right. Let's see, was there? Yeah. I'll and then once you head off, I'll read any of the remaining comments. But
let's do the hero scamos and then finish off with the last of the comments.
Oh, okay. So
if anyone gives like a super chat.
So
I'm not that greedy. I'm only Jewish. I'm not actually Jewish.
So is there like a specific text you want me to bring up, or
Well, we're just gonna. I was thinking it may just be good to instead of talking all about this that happens in the past. What do we do? How do we celebrate? How do you celebrate your Passover, and how does it relate to your Ashura stuff?
Well, so I mean, there is this really interesting song that a lot of people kind of just don't really translate properly. But so the song is called Vehishiamda, and so it means "and she stood," but it almost always gets translates "and it stood." And because the thing is that I'm sure like with Semitic languages, there like the word for it is either going to be the masculine or feminine word for basically he or she, and so with that you end up having some interesting things where objects or concepts can be feminized or masculinized, but on top of that, you actually have the fact that that sometimes it might not be things being masculinized or feminized, but actually might be a feminine or masculine concept being objectified. In which case, I think that's what happened with Vehishamda. But it says Vehishamda lavotenu Vehishamda. Basically, and she stood for us and for our ancestors. And then the last part ends off Vehakadosh Baruch Hu, but the Holy One, blessed be He, Matzilenu miyadam, saved us from their hands. So it's this idea, and she stood with us, or she like stood by us, and He rescued us. And this is a clear duality of preservation and protection. But like in one case, one's being understood as feminine, the other is masculine. Because you have Vehishamda, and she stood, Vehakadosh Baruch Hu, and He, the Holy One, blessed be He, which also just kind of tying into the idea of the hero scamos. I brought this up with you before, but one of the name that's ascribed to I think it's the fisherman of Atirat of the sea's home in the Baal cycle. His name is Kadesh Wa'amrur.
Yeah, the guy who packs up the donkey, gets the car ready for her, essentially. Rev up the Maserati.
Yeah, or in this case, the Maserati, like the Mazzolo, the signs. But yeah, with that, so you have this consort of Ashira or Atirat, who is basically named the fisherman of the Lady of the Sea. I forget exactly what he's called, but then he packs up this donkey. So he's associated with the donkey. He's also associated with fishing, and has a lot of these connections potentially to some. Not like to some imagery around Jesus, this idea of the fisher of men, and then you also have the idea of him riding on a donkey, which obviously these ideas are also taken from further back in Israelite, but also just Canaanite tradition. But yeah, with the whole idea of the Hieros Gamos, something that I found really interesting that a lot of people just kind of forget about is that this idea that like once a year that the high priest goes into the temple and he has to supplicate the god, that essentially he's doing what the what the king did with the priestess. This was during the Akitu festival, right? Like where I know there's some scholars that push back against it, but like the whole idea of like the Hieros Gamos between the king and the high priestess.
I'm not sure if it was between the king and the high priestess. I think the high priestess probably would have been like his sister or something, usually, because they kept it in the family. The important jobs. But there was definitely a Hieros Gamos. They would have young women, often virgins, young women. They would stand in for the goddesses, at least in Ugarit, the goddess Athirat and Rahmai, and the king, as God, deflowers them. That as part of a ritual, along with the symbolic food of the holiday. So that's the Ugaritic version of the Hieros Gamos. Was there something else I was thinking of? Oh, I don't know why I was thinking of this, but about in the book of God, is it Judges or Exodus? There's this weird story about how the ancient Israelites had a rape holiday. So they bring women of the different tribes, and the tribe of Benjamin would get to come and abduct and rape the women and take them back as wives, because of a war that almost wiped out the tribe of Benjamin.
Interesting. I wonder, that might have something to do. I don't know if that's connected, but there was this idea that like before Rosh Hashanah, like before the start of the new year, there would be this festival where the virgins or like the maidens who had trouble being betrothed or whatever, they would go out to the fields, and like the Bachurim, the firstborn, or like basically the bachelors, would go out and they would like dance together, and then they would end up hooking up, and that was basically the ancient Canaanite / Israelite dating app of the time. But yeah, it's interesting though, this idea of like the Hieros Gamos and basically the idea of the stand-in. You definitely have echoes of that within Greek tradition. The idea of Zeus taking a liking to different women and usually pretty brutally abducting them, and like that's something that it's one of those things where people like to be like, oh, look how vicious Yahweh is, but it's like he's cut out of the same cloth as gods like Zeus and trying to think about there's a type, it's a tribal warrior god, but the thing is that with Zeus, in his case, he wasn't as tribal, so and it's like same with Jupiter, but just this idea of I don't know, like I feel like at the end of the day, a lot of it has more to do with the acculturation and just the way that cultures were, more than it has to do with any sort of underlying theology.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of acculturation, because obviously there's many underlying similarities between Baal Hadad and Zeus and Jupiter and Tarhunt and Teshub and all these Adad, all these Marduk, these storm gods, that they get accultured for different regions, but they're essentially a similar deity. Okay, so how are we going to end this? We're going to have an ending thing? Musical ending? Maybe I'll end it with my music this time.
Just before we do that, I just wanted to answer one quick thing. I promise it'll just be one moment.
Is it the Molech one?
I guess there's two ones. One second. Wait, just real quick. Dr. Arshad Khalafzai said, Cohen Colette, while you have very little knowledge about Islam, I suggest please restrict yourself to Judaism and Christianity in your discussion. Most of Westerners have the same problem. And then you said, I am a Middle Eastern studies major. But But okay, wait, where is it?
A lot of people defended me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Wait, sorry, what?
What?
Oh no,
so under that, the comments they were defending my credibility to talk about Islam, because obviously, you know, we are talking about Judaism here, but you know, a lot of the same stuff applies in the background of Islam, just the same.
In different ways, though.
In different ways, it's a culture differently, because pre-Islamic Arabia had very strong ties to Canaan, and Arabs were in Canaan long before the Bible was ever written.
Yeah, and even the
Canaan as anyone.
And then even the term like Arab and Hebrew, Avar, they're connected. Like it's just changing the order. But okay, real quick. Mystical Order of Israel said, yeah, the Kaaba is from the Sabaean Marib in Yemen. There was Dul Khalasa. There was Shabwa. There was one till these days built by Bilqis, the queen of Sheba and Marib. Okay, wait here. I'm just going to skip to the.
Just skip to the serious questions.
Okay. Not pagan or Hebraic, but Mid-East, father like Hebrew, Pali, and Natib Kaddish, and Babylonia, Assyrian, Zuiri, alien to pagans. Okay, here was thoughts on Shoftim Shamgar Ben Anat. Was he a Hurrian judge of Israel? Can't speak to the Hurrian part, but the fact that he's named Ben Anat, pretty lately, there's something there. But that's something for another time, definitely. And then, did Moloch ever exist historically, or was he a creation of the Israelites distancing themselves from their pagan roots? I don't think that's even inherently or like explicitly pagan. It's more so just the idea of like the Molech offering. But it is possible there's connections with like Milcom, but it's really hard to say. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's obviously the root of kingship, Milka, that it was a king offering. So if a king makes an offering, that's going to be, you know, called the Moloch, I guess. And all sorts of gods would be given like king titles. I don't think there's any Moloch god. This is a sign of like the limited knowledge that people had before all these discoveries were made and before there was scientific scholarship about the Near East. There's no specific god Moloch, but different gods could be referred to with similar titles, and there was a Moloch sacrifice. That's the consensus.
Yeah, basically, it's like it was one of the arguments I've heard is that it was a kind of loyalty sacrifice or like, you know, devotion to the king. And then let's see. Oh yeah, Taj said, "Oh hell yeah, I tune in on Sundays." And then Darius said, "Thank you both at Cohen. Been watching many of your vids now, especially looking forward to the ball video." Yeah, your videos on ball have been really good. And then you said many of them.
What I know about. I am a ball man. I'm not much for the other parts, but the ball, I like the ball.
Yeah, balls to the wall.
We never dropped the ball in Kohan Colette's channel.
Oh, right. This was the last thing I wanted to say. So what is the weird hand symbol or Hamsa? It's connected because this is what connects the entire Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah, it's a huge thing in Morocco, huge thing in Jewish culture, huge thing in Canaanite culture, huge thing Arab culture. It's like a blessing thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, on that note, you want to cue up your music?
Yeah, I'm gonna play some. We're talking about Where is the Prince. I had the AI make a song for that with the lyrics that I wrote in Ugaritic. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Is it clear? Dance party. Play me off, DJ. And then I get the sword. And we cut ourselves because we're teenagers. I'll talk about that at another time, maybe in the autumn when it's seasonal. Those AI programs are making a lot of bops these days, right?
Yeah, this is really good.
By the way, as a scholar of Hebrew, how much of this do you understand?
Honestly, I would need to really pay attention, but also maybe speed it down. But
okay. On that abrupt note, I lose my face. Popeye's reference. Racist Popeye's reference.
Oof. Anyway. Yeah, this was good, and I look forward to doing this again sometime. I really feel like we had a great conversation.
Yes. Maybe next time less Hebrew. I keep getting flashbacks to the Seder. I'm a little bit dramatic. You're noticing I'm a little bit like my brother, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild that, like, seriously, such a small world. I ended up realizing that I know Colette's brother, like, not super well, but like well enough that I recognized him when I was like, wait, what?
He's the random guy who appears in some of my older videos.
Ah, nice. But
maybe sometime I'll share you the videos that I set to private that he was in, so you can embarrass him when you go to that Tango meeting. Okay, now let's seriously hang up, okay?
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care. I'll cue at the.
Ciao.
Bye.
So